261. Dendropolemics. Year 260. This is it. Alka looked around. Stella was located on Lava World, waiting to open the void portals. There was a force there, waiting to strike. The surface team's goal was simple. There were already existing cracks in the comet, left by the demon king Multipus. Most of the demon comet's mana was occupied by my constant intrusions. So, that prevented these cracks from healing. The surface team would spread out with large quantities of bombs, and set up the bombs. The other half of the force would be from my clone. That force would reach out for the nodes, capture or destroy them, and then also plant more bombs. The last force was the heroes and my domain holders. The heroes would attempt to engage in battle with Demon King Multipus, and also destroy the demonic presence around the comet's core, simultaneously with my clone's intrusions. The domain holders would split into groups. Edna, Alka and Lumuf would rush to the core, and attempt to destroy the demonic presence in the core, while Rune and Johann would assist the heroes. That was the rough plan. We didn't know it'll work. There was no time to simulate and test it out more. Alka's computation had no conclusive answers. It was an outcome that wasn't good enough, but our window of opportunity was slipping away. We needed the lava world intersection. Just as a means of escape, if our attack goes to hell. I've seen Multipus' offensive abilities and am fairly sure my clone would be able to hold out against it. Ultimately, the real risk is if Multipus decides to destroy everything around my clone, thus denying my access to the wider comet. Ken was alive. I made sure he still was. Colette knew I was doing something to him, and for reasons she understood. I also knew she didn't agree with me, but at the same time, she also understood her friend, Chung, well enough that I had to. So, after a few harsh words from her, she did not protest much beyond that. Prabhu and her were the more understanding ones. Adrian, Kelly and Kefri didn't care all that much for Ken. Given the situation, I had to just work with the cards I have. Maybe it was my lack of will. Colette sat next to Ken, one day, before all of this, and spoke to him. Hang in there. Hell let you go. Eon will let you pass. If there's one, there will be again. I hate it. You're old enough to know that we often have to give up on some of our values, in order to achieve far greater things. This is Ian's compromise. Fuck that. He cursed, as we prepared for the invasion. You want me to watch this? Ken said, coughing. There was a bit of mana spent to supply vision and share what I see with him, and an entire army of other advisors. Live advisors. It was one of the ways we augment the assault team with advice and instructions from a group of support staff. My artificial minds coordinated the vision sharing, through Dream Academy. Yes. Chung and the heroes are going there because you live. I spoke to the other heroes. They understood why I kept Ken alive despite his wishes. I needed the heroes to still work together, and Chung, as much as I hated him, still needed to do his part. The heroes, to some extent, understood this attack, on the spectrum of things, was quite suicidal. If the core exposes itself and releases its rivers of mana towards the heroes would be in trouble. The only way I know, at the moment, the heroes could engage Multipus with a reasonable margin of safety was with my roots constantly poking the core. It was so conditional. Everyone knew it. You keep me alive, so that I can watch my friends die. Friends who want you to live, Ken. I answered. Will you let me die if this works? Yes. Multipus left lasting damage to various parts of the comet over the year, and the core continued to remain on the defensive. It was wary of my constant poking. Intruder. It spoke, and only confused Multipus. In a case of the boy who cried wolf, all Multipus saw was more demonic mana, and I had somehow conned it into not responding to the core's constant yapping. Help. I wasn't sure who was asking. It didn't matter. I was going to break this comet apart. I need a window to act. To force myself through the core's defenses while Multipus engaged the heroes. All right, Stella, we're on your notice. The rest of the domain holders were camped on the clone. What do you mean, on my notice? Stella responded through our shared communication. The surface team was ready. The comet was visible on Lava World. Within range. But fine. It's within range. Get ready. She sent out a ping to the army, 2,000 strong. Each squad of 10 comprised usually 2 void mage, 2 regular mage, and about 6 combat units. Each of them would be tasked to destroy demons they encounter, and head to the specified locations with their payload of bombs. Another 3,000 Valthorns waited within my clone. The heroes have not teleported in. The heroes, with their tremendous star mana, would shine like beacons in the night sky. Multipus would be drawn to them immediately. They would need to find a place to engage somewhat distant from my clone. The group of 3,000 could then charge out towards their own targets, and also plan their own set of bombs. They would follow the various tunnels, holes or chasms we made over the last few years. Many of these chasms and cracks in the comet were left by the Demon King over the last year. Where my roots could fit, I made root tunnels for the Valthorns to walk through, but with most of my demonic mana focused on the core and clone, they'd have to make the last mile themselves. It wouldn't be comfortable terrain. All right, surface squad ready. We're going in, Stella said, as we instantly felt the twisting of space. Void portals emerged on the surface of the comet, and it immediately roused Multipus' interest. Edna, Alka, and Lumuf were next. They journeyed as close as possible to the core. The surface team is starting their part. Let's go. Heroes will arrive last to lure the Demon King away from us. Rune and Johann said, as the doors to my clone opened. To give my forces an opening, I intensified my intrusion on the core's mana shield. This forced the core to draw more mana inward. I've gotten better at understanding the nature of the core's mana shield over the last year. It was rather similar to the way the demon's rift gates were modulated by some kind of mana frequency. Leave. I poked deeper. I didn't do it before, because I wondered whether Multipus would eventually find out. But now, with the heroes coming to provide a distraction. Stop. I said to it. Turn back. Must do as commanded. I pushed further. My roots was quite far from my clone, but once Lumuf got closer, I would try to push a lot more. The heroes were next. They prepped for transport. The heroes didn't say much. Let's go skewer a giant octopus. Chung said. Make some takoyaki. It's got way more than 8 legs. An octopus is incorrect. Octopi. And you don't want to eat this dude's meat. It looks like a stone tentacle monster. Colette retorted. Whatever. Let's go. Well, let's go kick some comet ass, and buy our friends some space. Ken looked at one of the Valthorn attendants. It's all for this moment. I am alive for this. Go. Get this shit over with. The heroes were pulled through my body to my clone, and the mere presence of the heroes in my clone caused the entire comet to shiver. Multipus already sensed them. Well, our greetings are on the way. The heroes blasted out of the clone tree like superheroes leaving their base. Multipus flared up and seemed to fly. Okay. Let's go. Lumuf ran as fast as he could towards the core, activating magical teleports to get as close as possible. The core emitted a pulse of magic that shredded teleportation spells, but close-range teleports, where the magic itself is reinforced, was still possible. Edna laughed. You're awfully enthusiastic on this day. This is a great day. Lumuf countered. We've waited for this for decades. Throughout the comet, whatever residual mana swirling within the crystals all awakened from their slumber, and transformed into demons. Golems. More golems. The entire comet itself was probably a golem, linked through the energies of core. And the entire comet transformed into a battlefield. Surface team, report in. Stella said as she opened void portals. The crystal bombs they've made were deployed, ready to be triggered. We've set the bomb. One by one each of the teams reported that they've deployed the bomb. The bomb would go off once a magical pulse blasted outward. In theory, a magical pulse of the right frequency should cause all the bombs throughout. But the presence of the heroes reawakened the sleeping demons. Enemies inbound. The golems were an irritant. The self-destructing demons too. My Valthorns essentially had to play dodge, and luckily, they were good at that game. The Demon King Multipus found the heroes, and engaged. Their attacks began to cause tremors throughout the comet. It was still too large to crumble or shatter. But the already existing cracks widened. With the Demon King occupied, Lumuf managed to reach the very edge of the comet's core. Through Lumuf, I felt the presence of the comet's swirling wheel, as if multiple waves were trying to exist in a single body. The core itself is stitched together. Alka said, as he landed next to him. I could blow myself up here should break up the power supply of this giant golem. Let's try something else, first. Lumuf said, as my avatar form descended right next to the core. In my avatar form, I linked with the existing demonic roots, and pushed against the defenses of the comet's core. It was distracted, bothered. Its mana was affected by the presence of heroes on the world, and it couldn't help but be drawn to it. This meant there were gaps. Fluctuations in its shield of demonic mana. Alka looked at the golem while my roots and vines spread, pushing deeper into the comet's will. If there were different parts of it, I want to talk to them all. My roots pushed against the cracks in the core, widening them. The cracks spread, as my roots kept forcing through the gaps. Intruder. It said the same thing. My roots pushed deeper into the core. I've known from my roots that spread around the core that certain parts of it seemed different. Those gaps were weaknesses. Cobbled. And the person best to exploit those weaknesses was now here. Edna. Use that rock-crushing weapon. Her shining rock-crushing blade shone with magic. Magic that came from the system. It smashed into the core, and the weaknesses cracked. She frowned, held up the sword again. And swung again. And again. Each time, the cracks got far wider, and deeper. Int Ru Der. Help us. The words became a jumbled mess, and the erratic mana of the core scrambled to react. But Edna's blade cut through the rocks as if they were paper. At the same time, my roots also pushed through the other gaps, and my own mana began to mix in the core mana of the comet's core. As Edna's rock-slashing blade kept hacking away, I began to notice polarities in the core mana. There were areas of the core that had higher concentrations, and each of them were subtly different. They were normally mixed together. It's like a mixing bowl with multiple taps pouring slightly different colored water into it. They would normally mix together, but because the bowl of water was getting emptied quickly, we could see the slight variations in the different taps. We cut, and my roots pushed against the different parts of the stone. The heroes battled the Demon King through the various tunnels and chasms. In a way, it was an odd battle, because the heroes had to create their own paths, a task that fell mostly to Kefri and Adrian. I tried to support them, through a group of demonic trees, but with most of my mana and energies concentrated on the core, my ability was mostly useless. Yet, it was what I was doing in the core that caused Multipus to pause. As I pushed deeper into the core, attempting to reach those different parts of the will, Multipus stopped attacking, and started to retreat. Eon. The heroes roared as Multipus suddenly stopped and darted away. Multipus is retreating. Watch out. Edna and Lumuf panicked. Fuck. We don't have much time if it's headed this way. Alka grinned. On the contrary, I believe this is exactly what we need to do. Edna. Keep digging. We need to get deeper into the core. Edna's constant attacks dug a fairly deep hole into the core, one that my roots quickly infested and reinforced. Edna stared at the dwarf, as a realization got into her. Her rock slasher blade glowed. Well, I suppose that is one way to take out a giant golem. We all felt the comet shaking violently. Eon. Stella said. The cracks and gaps in the structure of the comet. They are the areas where the giant golem is supposed to separate itself. Like a transforming robot, the comet was essentially one giant golem that was curled up. If it survived impact, it would unfurl itself like a rock transforming into a robot. The gaps were not weaknesses, they were there because they were meant to be. Alka naturally understood the implications. Wait, doesn't that mean we're just putting bombs at the surface? Edna laughed. Well, I suppose amateur mistakes happen to even the best of us. Let's just hit this core as deep as we can. If we can take out the central power source. The dwarf nodded. There is no choice, then. Try to hold Multipus back. I commanded the heroes, and they tried. Multipus was trying to flee towards the core. Chung fired a magical arrow with a chain made of magic, like a harpoon, and the arrow pierced into Multipus' limb. The mages cast spells of ice. I tried to use my own roots and assist in entangling the Demon King. But it was strong. It punched through the spells, and it sacrificed a limb. The limb broke apart, while its main body continued to rush towards the core. Fuck. Chung cursed, as he still rushed ahead. He fired a few more arrows that pierced Multipus throughout its body, and through that magic, yanked the gigantic Demon King backwards. Help. Rune and Johan too, launched attacks at the Demon King, and also harpoons of their own. They needed to pin the Demon King down. The heroes quickly came to Chung's aid as they helped pull those chains. Is this enough? Edna asked, but she kept cutting. She was in the zone, hacking like a machine. The three domain holders were quite deep now. Help in TRUDERRRR. The will of the comet roared. I was fairly certain this will of the world was mostly corrupted by the demons. I could feel Multipus struggling against the heroes. My mind instantly felt the hammering, as the comet's core assaulted me with its presence. Lumuf winced, as he too shared my burden of facing the comet's will. We need to keep going. Lumuf repeated. We must be doing something right. Multipus twisted its tentacles, and doing so, dragged the heroes along. It blasted attacks their way, and it spread demonic magic into the crystals around it. Each time it does so, more of the comet's network of tunnels collapsed and crumbled. Each of the Demon King's attack, a creature made of tremendous demonic mana, and in Multipus' case, also void and core mana, began to leave tangible ripples in the comet's bubble of space. The comet, an object traveling through the sea of void, started to experience turbulence. The comet's reality began to tear apart. 262. Rock and Log Roll. Year 260. Comet Invasion Part 2. As the bubble of space was ripped apart by the Demon King's struggles, Stella immediately sounded the alarm. The domain holder of Void was most sensitive to the weakening bubble of reality. "I am evacuating the team," Stella yelled, as the Void mages began to bail out, back to Lava World. "All this disturbance is making it harder for us to escape." Void mages began to open magic, but the turbulence sucked them in, and some of them vanished. Literally. Consumed by the Void Sea, or perhaps flung somewhere. It's like jumping off an airplane while it's flying through a hurricane. The little tunnel of void energy between the worlds that a void mage forms had very little chance to survive the teleportation. Scratch that. Do not attempt teleportation back to Lava World. Team teleport to the clone. Eon will have to send us out. I wasn't sure whether that was a good idea, as my massive clone body was also beginning to feel the effects of reality crumbling apart. It felt like some parts of my roots seemed to have vanished, along with whatever rocks it held onto. Magic was going to be wonky in this sort of situation. The entire comet's vibrations grew in intensity. My demonic roots and the connections to my spawn demonic trees shook, and parts of the comet began to shift. Stella stopped. I think the golem might be waking up. Really? There were parts of the comet, where my roots were, it felt as if the golem wasn't waking up, but instead was forced by the ripples of space. More and more of my Valthorns began teleporting to my clone, and I quickly sent them back. But Stella remained. She held the button to trigger the explosives. Around the same time, the comet's core itself tried to reassert its hold on reality. The flow of the rivers of demonic mana went nuts, while more of it tried to block my intrusion into the core. It wasn't working. The domain holders were immune to the effects of the demonic mana. The core's attempt to overwhelm my 3 domain holders hacking deeper into the core was ineffective. "How much deeper do we need to go?" Edna asked, but not once her attacks stopped. She seemed to be able to wield the rock cutter blade as if it weighed nothing. Alka frowned. "I don't know, but from the magical energies around us, I think much deeper." The tunnel was also covered with my demonic roots, but the core's frantic attempts to throw all their mana at the domain holders was just like its attempts to overwhelm my clone. Blocked. If it was anyone else, they'd be overwhelmed by demonic mana and corrupted. Stop. Lumuf, and myself, was bombarded with the voices and screams of the demon's core. My senses, through the roots connected to Lumuf, told me this was the right path. I was getting closer to the core. "Turn back. Truce." The voices of the demon's core got louder. We kept going anyway, because the cracks kept growing. With each hit, the stability of the comet's reality bubble weakened. "Are you guys alright?" Stella asked from the surface. Her team protected her, while the demons tried to attack the surface team. Even as reality seemed to be falling apart, the demons were relentless. Spurred and empowered by the chaotic mess of demonic energy, demons attacked Stella repeatedly. Rune and Johann pinged back. "We're fine, but the Demon King's still getting closer. You should get yourself back to safety too." Stella slammed that idea. "I'll do that once I get everyone back to the clone safely." Even then, some of the teleportation failed, and some Valthorns vanished into the nothingness. If that was an end, it was a cruel one, because consumed by the void meant I didn't even manage to hold their soul. The Demon King Multipus made progress towards the core. All the heroes and their repeated attacks, and somehow Multipus was just built to a different level of toughness and strength. Rune and Johann's repeated strikes did nothing. Johann even summoned his dragon to attack the Demon King, but its wounds healed as quickly as they were made. This guy is incredibly tough. Even after hitting with all the shit we have, it's still going. "Edna, how are you holding down there?" Edna responded. "We're deep in the core. I am feeling a huge amount of mana swirling around us. We seem to be breaking reality up." Alka touched the rock around him, and felt the swirling energies. He gave Lumuf a look. "He'll have to use his ability soon. Will you be able to get out?" Stella was worried that the core's huge blob of mana and its existence would mess with my teleportation ability. "Doesn't seem like it would," Edna countered. "But no matter, we'll be fine. Send the rest of them back." "Trying," Stella said. "I am trying to paint in a storm, here." The 3 domain holders laughed. "Well, we're in the eye of the storm, and we don't feel a thing." "Come on." Stella sent more of the Valthorns back to my tree. But even more vanished, seemingly eaten by the ripples of the decaying void bubble. Shit. I didn't feel them die, but I suddenly could not sense them anymore. I tried to pull them back through the system, but I couldn't. What's happening? I asked. The void's decay is creating very unstable areas between the comet's reality and the greater void sea, and those unstable areas, well, I've no idea what the hell is happening. The comet, or the comet golem, shifted. An entire chunk of the comet vanished. If our goal was to break the comet, it seems we're almost there. Even if it felt like we were not winning. Should we just start the bomb? Stella said. But what was the golem? Was it the core? Or was it the demon king Multipus? Or is there a part that I am missing? Or is it all three together, and they fuse together like some combination robot transformation? What exactly are we targeting when we bomb this piece of rock? Just destroying the rocks. The heroes attacked the demon king constantly. Multipus' severed tentacles attacked the heroes like automatons, but its attacks were like the wild flailing of a separated lizard's tail. All it did was leave more cracks and marks on the demon's comet. More chunks of the comet vanished. Why won't you die? Chung cursed as he bombarded Multipus with even more attacks. But the demon comet's core redirected its mana flow to Multipus, and doing so significantly amplified its regeneration. Eon, can you shut down the flow of mana? It's regenerating from all our hits. The mages, Prabhu and Colette said. I tried. I attempted to mess with the mana flow of the demon comet's core. The mana of the demon's comet core pretty much lashed out erratically, yet the nature of demonic mana meant it still couldn't corrupt something that was already corrupted. Crack. The comet's core then released a strange pulse. Stella's eyes widened. The comet's structure made huge, loud cracks. The comet was cracking apart, like a golem unfurling itself. Eon, I am triggering the bomb now. I don't think we can wait anymore. She pressed it, and a magical signal blasted outwards, out to all our crystal bombs. Throughout the comet, each of them vibrated, and the magic stored within them was instantaneously released. The magical ripple from the explosion could be felt throughout the comet. On its own, the bombs wouldn't have destroyed the comet. But there were cracks, and tears already present in the comet, many created by the same demon king. The cracks and weaknesses in the structure collapsed, and the sudden explosion of magic only amplified the chaos of the already chaotic bubble of reality around the comet. Parts of the comet vanished, along with everything on it. Bail, bail, bail. Rune and Johann commanded, as the cavern chamber they were in began to collapse. Let's blast the demon king with the strongest thing we have in Bail. The fraying fabric of space could be felt even in the depth of the comet, not just on the surface. The heroes could feel it too, as if the rifts itself were twisting. The heroes attacked with their most powerful attacks, trying to weaken the demon king. It took the hit, and then released a magical pulse quite like the self-destruct sequence. Shit, I cursed. Rune and Johann both yelled in unison. Teleport back to Ian's clone. Now. But the magical ripples in the comet's reality made teleportation messy. Both Prabhu and Colette, being the masters of magic, managed to teleport back safely to the clone. The heroes did not expect the other heroes to have difficulty. Kefri, Adrian, Chung and Kelly were left behind. Their first attempt to teleport failed as their magic was torn by the collapsing fabric of space and reality. Shit, I can't get a clean teleport. Prabhu, Colette, help, Chung yelled. Wait, trying. Prabhu and Colette rushed to create a portal from their end, while Rune and Johann both rushed towards the Demon King, with a slew of special anti-magical and anti-mana weapons. These were made as part of the anti-explosion countermeasures, because we noticed that they seemed to reduce the potency of the Demon King's explosions. A portal opened, and Adrian, Chung and Kefri got through. Rune and Johann's anti-magical weapons smashed into the Demon King, and one of the Demon King's tentacle limbs exploded. The explosion, however, was lopsided, the blast radius curved and bent by the ripples of space. It destroyed Kelly instantly. My two domain holders, despite being nearer, escaped the blast radius. Kelly has died, you received one fragment. Kelly, damn it. Adrian cursed, but now in the safety of the clone, there was nothing he could do. Let's go. I spoke to the heroes. Let's send you back before reality crumbles around us. But Adrian frowned. I'll retrieve what's left of Kelly, if there's any. There was a charred body. I felt her soul enter my own. The blast radius from the Demon King's exploded tentacle left a huge tunnel along its blast radius. The comet's crumbling was almost certain, as the cracks in the comet were now everywhere. More chunks of the comet seemingly disappeared into the void sea. But the Demon King wasn't dead. The Multipus then multiplied, its body bubbled like a strange boiling pot. Wait, what? Johann was bewildered that it could launch such an attack. That wasn't its suicide move. Rune looked at the Demon King. They kept attacking, but without the heroes, they didn't have the firepower needed. Multipus was easily the strongest demon king they ever fought in terms of durability. Never have they seen a demon king take so many hits, and could still counterattack. Then, back in the core, Lumuf was the first to sense the unusual magical movements in the core's mana. The core's behaving strangely. The mana of the demon's comet began spread throughout the comet, instead of trying to defend itself. My mana pierced through its defenses. I took in some of that demonic mana, and pulled it through my vines and roots. Only to immediately see a vision of a world. Then a direction. An explosion. Impact. There were coordinates transmitted through the demonic mana and core mana, and I sent it to Stella immediately. Tree home. She deciphered it. The mana fanned out, and the core itself started to crack intentionally. It was splitting apart. Wait, I thought the comet's a golem. Edna said, wondering as the cracks in the tunnel we made started to get a lot bigger suddenly. Even more chunks of those comet parts vanished, as if swallowed by the void sea. But the comet's mana touched every single piece of rock it could, as if giving each and every chunk instructions, core mana and demonic mana, and a destination. My mana tried to steal more of these mana away, removing the mana from the crystals and rocks. The comet's turning into a barrage of missiles. Stella realized. Alka frowned. Lumuf, you might want to bail. Edna, you should probably activate your duty now. I think we need to blow this core up before it gets even further. Multipus multiplied, splitting itself into many smaller tentacle demons, and then, each of those demons split up. Only one headed for the core. You guys seeing this? Rune and Johann tried to attack repeatedly, but Multipus, still powered by the core's tremendous mana, continued to regenerate. The fact that they could hack the core to produce demonic mana, and then use an infinite regeneration source clearly meant the demons actually had some defensive advantages too. This was something we needed to prepare for. I tracked the movement of the smaller demon kings, and noticed they entrenched themselves in different parts of the comet, as if preparing to hitch a ride. Great, I cursed. If these smaller rocks hit Treehome, it will also deliver Multipus to Treehome like an orbital pod. There's no time to waste, Eon. Let's nuke this shit apart before we lose our window. Edna nodded. I'll stay with you. As a last-ditch effort, through Lumuf, I tried to seize control of the core. I had already broke through its defenses earlier. But getting an entry wasn't the same as taking over. My mana pushed against the core. Even with my significantly improved control over demonic mana and core mana, I still didn't have enough. A core's mana still outstripped mine. Chunks of the comet began to break off, but these chunks did not vanish into the void sea. Instead, we could see them turn into smaller, much smaller bubbles of space. Their own little bit of reality. Like smaller comets emerging from the larger comets, they separated, somehow, from the main comet. Then, some sped off, out of reach, and some drifted slower. Some vanished. But most of these much smaller chunks, they moved in the same direction, towards Treehome. Faster. And out of reach. I was impressed. With the mana and instructions provided by the demonic core, the chunks of comet could somehow maintain its own bubble of reality. So I tried to steal more of the mana. I wanted to know how the comet did that. All that did was give me more visions of Treehome, and coordinates. Coordinates that the demons used for their rift gates. Stella teleported to my clone and pretty much told Lumuf, Alka and Edna to get out. Get your ass out of there. Wait, Alka said. I need to nuke this thing. Not when the demon kings headed your way. Multipus, at least, the largest remaining segment of the multi-body demon king that is Multipus, continued to head towards the core. More parts of the comet were breaking up. Alka laughed. I happen to enjoy living dangerously. There's no time to wait. Lumuf. Edna. Stella frowned. There's no need to risk it. The comet's smaller. We'll have to prepare for impact. Alka disagreed. On the contrary, this is the perfect chance for me to destroy the largest remaining part. I'll stay with you, Edna said. Someone needs to hold the demon king off. That won't be necessary. Alka laughed. My ability was meant for this. All my domain holders carried my special familiar. Edna waited, and realized. Teleport out once you're able. There's absolutely nothing to worry about. Alka assured her. Go. Edna nodded. Very well. The rest of the domain holders were sent back to the temporary safety of Freshka. By now, everyone who could get out, was out. What's left were those that were swallowed by the void. Just me and you, Eon. Alka said as we felt the demon king rush towards us. By now, the core was cracked in many ways. The demon king Multipus somehow could sense Alka's presence. With most of the comet broken up, there was no need for me to disguise my mana. The sea of demonic mana around us was weakened. The core itself had lost multiple chunks to the void sea. Fragments. Like an onion, the entire outer layer of the comet was already gone. What's left was the inner part, an egg-shaped inner core that was filled with holes. Even my clone struggled to hold on, as all the rock around my clone began to vanish, swallowed by the void. The bubble of reality was shrinking quickly. The Demon King charged through the gaps of the hole, and Alka grinned. I've always wanted to be a pioneer. He waited as long as he could, and just as the Demon King was about to strike, he activated his explosion ability. In a single explosion, it cracked the significantly weakened inner sphere, and it crumbled into hundreds of chunks. This included the rock that held my clone. I held onto the rocks around me, and I floated in the void sea once more like the comet world. I tried to grab whatever rocks I could that flew close. Alka naturally noticed, but he frowned. Looks like it's not over. The hundreds of chunks each were their own bubble of reality, many with their own little demon kings on them. The largest of the comet's remnants was the hollowed core. There was a carapace of sorts, an outer frame that defined the core. Fractured from all the strike, it was the largest single remaining object, and on it were Alka and Multipus. It looked like a car that went through a nuclear explosion, with only its charred frame left. The explosion destroyed 3 of the Demon King's tentacles, but it was not enough. I saw a tentacle pierced through my dwarven domain holder. Multipus somehow lived, holding on to the remnant of the hollowed core. Alka, I asked. I am fine. We can resurrect, remember? Alka laughed, blood splattering out of his mouth, and in his dying breath. I shall be the pioneer for the resurrection ability. Then, even the remnant frame of the egg-shaped comet's core shattered like glass. With the comet's core effectively fractured into hundreds of parts, the bubble of reality around us collapsed, like a big giant soap bubble exploding into hundreds of smaller soap bubbles. Each of those small bubbles represented a tiny chunk of the comet. My clone vanished with the collapse of the last bubble of reality, shredded by the void sea. The largest chunk of the comet's core vanished with us. Some devolved into crumbs, little chunks that continued the journey. Alka has died. His soul has returned to your main body, and will now begin resurrection. Resurrection will take 17 years. You may consume excess hero fragments, in excess of 100 hero fragments, to accelerate the resurrection time. Each hero fragment will reduce time needed by 5 years. You've shattered the demon's comet. You've gained 18 levels. You are now level 259. You can now deploy 3 more additional clones. New domain. Ability obtained. Panspermia. In addition to your clones, you may now control up to 10 node trees. Node trees take the form of space seeds that you may now shoot across the void sea like a minor comet of your own or deliver normally by your assistance. Once they land on a particular world, they will transform into node trees, which will function like a teleportation gate to any of your clone trees. You may also convert any node tree into a clone, if you have a clone slot available. Doing so will free up a node tree slot. While the space seeds travel through space, they have some vision. Note that space seeds can be destroyed if they encounter void barriers or unusual events, or are attacked by the creatures of the void. New domain passive ability obtained. Planetary symbiosis. Each of your clones now generates significantly higher mana and energy. Additionally, some of these energies will be shared with the will of the worlds, and expand the bubble of reality. This will allow for the existence of secondary livable planets in the same realm, and also solar systems. Note, removing your clone will cause the eventual collapse of these secondary planets. New domain passive ability obtained. Titan substitution, Titan supercharge. Due to the significant increase in power and energies of your clones, each of your clone bodies can power one Titan each. For Titans powered by clones, you do not require a Titan frame from champions or heroes. With Titan Supercharge, combining a Titan frame with a clone substitution will immediately increase their power levels. New title awarded. Cometbreaker. Alka's soul nestled quietly within a special chamber deep inside my main body. He was asleep, his soul damaged by travel. The reconstruction of his body happened through some kind of system shenanigans that I did not understand. But I wasn't the only one that gained levels, and 2 of the Valthorns that fought with us were elevated into new domain holders. One of the physically focused Valthorns who did a lot of excavating, his name was Izar, a brawler ranger. He was level 143 just 6 years ago, but the entire Comet campaign somehow pushed him over the edge, and now he was a level 150, domain of the fist. It was a funny thing, of course, because everyone joked that he should have been a shovel domain, since all he used during those last few years were shovels and mining pickaxes. His first ability, Fist of the Rising Star, allowed him to essentially punch stuff super hard. The other was Kapha, and he became the first lizardfolk, Domain of the Claw. His first ability was also another combat ability with some parallels to Edna's. Tooth and Claw made Kapha a temporary hero tier combatant, but didn't grant him invulnerability. In terms of utility, I suppose both their abilities were kinda lame, but additional hero tier combatants were always useful. Edna too reached level 190, but her new domain ability was instead an expansion of her duty beyond life and death. It now protected her for a week, and also cast a healing presence on all allies around her. Rune and Johann gained levels too. Johann gained the ability to have a second super pet. His dragon also experienced a sudden growth and became much bigger. Personally, I found Johann's pet somewhat underwhelming, since it didn't do much on the comet. But I suppose it wasn't the right tool for that sort of situation. Rune's sniper domain granted him a power that overlapped with mine. Domain awareness, and granted him full knowledge and awareness of everything around him. In short, he was a super spy. In some cases this would be useful, especially when we're exploring new worlds, but on the core clone worlds, this ability's use would be fairly limited since my trees effectively covered most practical uses. There was also the issue of how domain abilities spied on other domain abilities, and in Rune's case, it didn't work. Stella also reached level 170, and so gained 2 additional Void Explorers. In addition, she gained the ability Void Shadow, where she could sense all use of void magic and reopen any recently closed portals or tunnels. Lumuf, my domain holder, was now the second highest leveled person around, as he reached almost level 197. His new domain ability was Fury of the Avatar. In a weird twist of how skills and abilities stacked, Fury of the Avatar made Lumuf a stronger combatant than my main body, because there was some kind of multiplier applied when fighting through Lumuf's avatar mode. I'd have to wait till Alka woke up to see what he got, if he got anything after all. Stella looked into the skies, as we prepared for the next phase of our battle. There will be smaller comets and meteors. These rocks wouldn't destroy the world. But it could destroy cities and countries, and there's the Demon King's body that's hitchhiking on these objects. There was no way to intercept them. It was just emptiness after the lava world, but they were all still headed our way. Objects from space would likely appear at the very edge of Treehome's bubble of reality. One that was much bigger thanks to my new ability. They were much smaller. These fragments of the comet. Baby comets. Stella's data indicate that the largest of them could still be destroyed conventionally. But there's a lot more to destroy. So, taking a note out of missile and projectile warfare, we plan to build weapons to shoot down the smaller comets and meteors, the moment they enter the range of our reality. We'd have to build moon-based weapons platforms, and prepare to shoot those meteors and comets down. We've destroyed the biggest comet. Somehow. Now, we'd have to shoot down some meteors. What remains of the comet would not wipe us out, even if it would rain death on our world. A problem a few years down the road. But first, with the focus on the comet world lifted, there were a few annoyances I wanted to solve. I have another annoying shiny rock to crush. 263.1 Penaltries, double chapter day 1/2. Year 261, chapter 263. Estimated 8 to 9 more years to impact. The heroes mourned the death of their own, the Valthorns mourned the disappearance of so many Valthorns. About 300 Valthorns vanished when their attempts to teleport back to my clone were interrupted by the fluctuations in the fabric of reality. Death. But we had to prepare for the next stage. There were now smaller meteors headed our way. Demonic meteors that we have to destroy. My council summoned the builders and mages, to prepare our countermeasures. Our countermeasures largely fell into 3 groups. The first would be our void mages. These void mages would essentially jump to these meteors once they are detected, plant bombs, and leave. With their smaller size, we could knock them out fairly easily. The next defense would be our space-based defenses. We need to shoot them down the moment they cross into Treehome's bubble of reality. The main anchor of this would be the moon base and the various asteroids around Treehome. I'd need to reactivate the moon base, and then transform it into a space-based weapons and projectile array. According to our trackers, some of those meteors will be faster than others, so we should be seeing some of these space rocks a lot sooner than the rest. Some of them will carry the smaller Demon King Multipus on them, which means we need a way to destroy the Demon King in space. Our initial plans for this is to construct weapons platforms in space, redirect these smaller rocks to them, where we can then engage the Demon King in combat. My builders all sketched out multiple wild ideas. Space-based ballistas, guns, cannons, spaceships and tugboats. At this point, we decided to go with all of them. Some of these meteors are uninhabited, without the presence of Multipus, and are essentially moving on momentum. Magical ships could then apply an opposing force to bring them to a halt, and then guide them into a safe orbit around the sun. Those where we detect the presence of Multipus have to be destroyed, because Multipus would attack our ships, and these ships are unlikely to be hardy enough to withstand a Demon King's strike. We would also like to construct special suits for the heroes. The ranged heroes like Prabhu, Colette and Chung should be able to destroy these smaller rocks. All they need is the ability to fight in space. Because this remains solely within Treehome's bubble of reality, we don't have to cross the Void Sea, and use void magic portals, so conventional magical portals will be sufficient. The third layer of defense would be our Treehome-based defenses. Shields, more cannons, magical weapons. These should catch those missed by our first two forces. Most of our efforts will be focused on the first two layers, because once they enter Treehome, that's already a little too late to prevent destruction. Instead, it'll be just damage mitigation. For these, we would need to construct massive shields and barriers in all our major cities, along with magical weapons to destroy these space rocks, or deflect them away from large inhabited areas. There was a small little funeral for Kelly, the Mountain World heroine. She stuck around in my soul realm for a bit, and then vanished when it was time. Death seems frequent, lately. Happy? Ken asked, coughing. He sat in a chair filled with my vines, those vines ensured that he lived. I had to intervene frequently over the past few months, his condition worsening. In a way, he was chained to his chair, and it was a miserable existence. I was ready to let him go. Chung was next to him. Fuck it, Ken. No. The comet's done. Let it go already. The former hero said. It's time I go. Eon, don't you? Goodbye. I can feel it. Ken smiled. He knew I wasn't planning on letting him live even longer. This was it. Prabhu and Colette stood nearby, and held his hand. Eon, save him. Chung roared. Angry. Frustrated. There's not much I can do, if he doesn't allow me to meddle with his soul. I could force it, but I wouldn't say that part out loud. In a way, I was allowing him to die. I could keep him alive. I could undo it, with far more intrusive procedures. But there was no point. Ken smiled, and I reckon he had fun. You weren't this mad when Hafiz died. Chung fumed, as Ken closed his eyes for the last time. Ken's body gave way. His hero friends watched him die, and I felt his soul slip out of his body. I tried to catch it. Just like Hafiz, he appeared briefly in my soul realm. It's this place again. Now, it was his turn to be a soul, a floating ball of light. Well, this is the middle ground, before you go to where you are meant to go. I told him. This is the final station, before the unknown. Is it really the unknown, or you just won't tell me? Ken asked. I really don't know, but goodbye, Ken. You've been helpful. Thanks. I wish you well, and I hope you do not stray too far from your goals. I'll try. I answered. Try harder. The myriad worlds suffer from your neglect. I felt that sting a little. That's harsh. Neglect is. It is only true. Ken said. There is always more to be done, and that weighs on you, far more than anyone else. It was hypocritical coming from him. Says the one who fled from his duties. I am weak. Fragile. Ken admitted. I only hope that you, and those around you, can be way stronger than we ever were. At this point, we had a few years where there's nothing we could do. The smaller meteors are now in the depth of the Void Sea, and they are mostly invisible to us. At most, we could hit some of them once they enter within 1 year of Treehome, but that's a fairly small sphere of influence to destroy hundreds of meteors. So, there was an annoyance that I wanted to deal with. One that I've tolerated for a while. Let it go, Jonpu said, as Kefri soon informed him of what I intended to do. No, I answered. Kefri herself seemed pleased. In every world, in every land, if there is a gun, it must be fired at least once. Not because it has a target, but to show the world that it is real, and that it can be fired. The magic city of Man, Myelga. Seat of the immortal Crystal King's power. An immortal, a domain holder, an irritation. 4 of my domain holders volunteered to deliver the message. Lumuf, Edna, Rune and Johan. We made a statement, as we appeared in a highly visible portal of magic. My 4 landed on a vast open field on the outskirts of the city. The army of Myelga scrambled to action, as a scout immediately rode towards the 4. Stop. State your business. We're here to settle a score with your Crystal King. Lumuf answered, as our aura of power radiated outwards. Lumuf's presence was like a tsunami of magic that propagated outwards, and smashed into the city's own little sphere of influence. Everyone in that city immediately felt a strong discomfort. The air turned tense, charged with our aura pushing against the mountain zone. He would know we are here. I found it ironic to think that he was right, really. How unfortunate. It is a beautiful city. I once stood right there to look at the city below. Lumuf said. Well, and now I've come again to break it. The four were soon at the edge of the city. There were soldiers at the gate, all armed to the teeth. They were prepared to fight. A brave captain shouted, "Leave. You are not welcome here. We do not need your welcome." Lumuf countered, "We'll find our way easily enough." The captain shouted back. Even from a distance I could see him quivering in his place. "Leave. Consequences," Lumuf declared, ignoring the captain's statement. His voice wasn't loud, he didn't shout, but the entire mountain shook. "Did you believe your actions had no consequence?" The forces of the Crystal King marched out to face my domain holders. One of the Crystal King's officials wore armor made of crystals. It was powerful, and definitely would have cowed any lesser foe. But today their enemies are not lesser foes, because they were the ones shaking. "You dare challenge one of the three?" The leader of the defenders said, clearly juiced on some kind of potion. Lumuf stood forth, as my avatar form descended on the city of magic. The entire earth shook, and people began to flee. There was panic all around, but we waited. There was no need to begin the attack yet. We wanted them to remember this. We wanted the survivors to remember the cost of raising their arms against our goal. We want this tale to be spoken for all of eternity. When the tree broke the crystal mountain, Lumuf smiled, and gently responded to the man. Yes, we dare. Through Lumuf our roots cracked the earth, ripped the grounds, the crystals cracked. The mountain glowed. Magic. And it met my own aura of anti-magic. The weaker magics crumbled. Gigantic roots and vines emerged throughout the city's walls, and it met with crystals. The citizens of Myelga seemed in shock, but soon discovered that we didn't intend to harm them. My quarrel was with the Crystal King, and those who stood with him. The people fled, as my roots climbed over their magical walls, and pierced their magical shields. My roots poked through their shields easily. It wasn't hard to coat my roots with a bit of anti-magic sand. Lumuf stepped closer. The three others followed closely behind. Eon always wanted to know what the Crystal King really looked like, underneath all that rock. The defenders of the Crystal King raised their weapons. Fully equipped warriors, in the best armor and weapons they have. Power flowed through them, but they fainted the moment the weight of my presence pressed on them. And it was foolish. The Crystal King will be punished. And nothing will stop me. 263.2. When Roots Crack the Mountain, Double Chapter Day 2 Halves. Interlude. The Crystal Defenders. Myelga. Pride of the human lands, home of their lord and protector, the Crystal King. One of the three hegemons of the land, there was never a time where the Captain Onyx of the Crystal Guard ever felt that Myelga would be attacked outside of a demonic event. Even when demons spawned in their world, when the demons invaded, Myelga stood. Myelga was home to so many magical enchantments and defenses, that in the era of legends, it once withstood the might of even a demon king, and had enough firepower to counterattack, and injure it significantly. In Captain Onyx's mind, that was the truth, even if it was untested. Because that was what it felt to live in Myelga. To walk the city streets was to walk near the power that lived within the great Crystal Mountain. To live under the overwhelming presence of the Lord of Crystal. In the minds of Myelga's defenders, an attack on Myelga was impossible. No one ever tried to attack Myelga. Even the other two forces never ever managed to march forces beyond their inner ring of defenses. Even when this new force, this upstart pretender called Eons sent an army burning through their defensive lines, just to help the heroes destroy the Demon King, it never ever occurred to them that Myelga would be attacked. After all, who dares attack a deity? Well, other deities, naturally. Onyx ran, as the defensive bells rang. It has never rang in a real emergency, not once in the past 50 years. All previous ringing of the bells were all for drills. Entirely for practice purposes, and publicly declared. Is it a drill? One of the civilians asked as Onyx ran towards the tower. He shook his head. There really was no need to answer when they all felt the air feel heavy, as if the heavens itself pressed on them. Their mountain pulsed, and they felt a familiar force rise from below to resist it. The soldiers were not sure what to do, either. In truth, only the elite guard would be able to stand against whatever dared attack the Crystal King. The lesser soldiers are nothing more than flies, if such a hypothetical enemy existed. There must be some great illusion. An army somehow snuck past those lazy defenders and scouts. Onyx climbed up the stairs and reached the walls, expecting an army outside. All he saw was 4 individuals in a terrain he did not recognize. A man with a wooden staff, a woman in knight's armor, and 2 archers. In normal cases, he'd laugh them off, but all of them emitted an aura not unlike their own deity. Their ripples of power caused the air itself to seemingly churn in defiance. The grass seemed to sway violently. The ground trembled. The entirety of Myelga's surroundings were almost entirely dusty, rocky land. When did it all turn into grasslands? Crystal King. The voice was soft, and came from an older man with a beard and wrinkled face. He sounded older than he looked. We have found your attempts to sabotage our preparations against the Demon King appalling. Onyx frowned. He wasn't aware such a thing happened, but if it did, it must be one of the High Crystal Priest's plots. The elite forces of the king, and magical golems, all emerged from their barracks and waiting areas, ready to fight. He looked and saw one of the elite guards, Commander General Salmon, take the stand and shouted something. Despite the Commander General yelling at the top of his lungs, he heard nothing. Instead, all he heard was the voice of the older man. Consequence. Huge towering roots shot out of the ground around the city, akin to the tentacles of a kraken pulling down a giant ship. There were so many roots that emerged out of nowhere, they emerged outside of all the walls, and they slammed into the defensive shields. The shields wobbled. Onyx prayed the shields would hold, but they didn't. The roots didn't even have to try very hard. He watched the roots cut through the shields as if it was like soft butter. The citizens panicked, and screamed. The Commander General yelled, activating some kind of ability. The walls of the city glowed. Magical blasts of all kinds looked ready to be fired, and as they activated. Then half of them were snuffed out instantly, like a fire that ran out of oxygen or fuel. Even Onyx felt the effects of the anti-magical aura. Anti-magic. He cursed, as he watched the enchanted weapon in his hand flicker, as if magic was drained out of it. How? He could even sense it in the air, as the air itself felt as if mana was sucked out of it. The other half, the higher tier spells slammed into gigantic wooden shields. It didn't do any damage. The soldiers panicked. One of them, horrified, and then begun to run. The rest of them realized the same, as did so. Wait, what are you doing? Onyx shouted at the soldiers, some of them clearly weren't ready to fight them. We are the guards of the great crystal city. We do not run. Captain. This is madness. We're not fighting them. No way. The soldier countered. Not those gigantic roots, and not without magic. Onyx looked at the soldiers. They stood unmoved. But, Captain, there is a time to be brave. Now is not that time. Can you not feel their power pressing down on us? He couldn't continue the sentence, as the entire magical defensive network of Myelga shattered like glass. Not from an attack, but from the weight of the enemy's presence. Onyx looked back, and his eyes gazed on the gigantic silhouette of a dark, shadowy tree. It was big, as if he was looking up a tree the size of a mountain, and a shadow, a silhouette, a distortion in the air in the form of a tree. Just merely glancing at the strange apparition in the air made Onyx feel as if he was looking at 1,000 forests, and somehow, a single tree. His fingers trembled. The soldiers couldn't even run. Their knees went weak. What in the mountains? He felt his legs buckle. Not just them. All of the soldiers felt a weight of fear that suddenly crashed into the entire city. The panicked citizens turned even more panicked and delirious. Chaos turned into insanity, as they screamed and shouted. Only the crystal guards managed to stand in defiance. Onyx couldn't see who, but it was one of the great generals of the Crystal King shouted. Generals rally. A wave of relief flooded the entire city, and Onyx felt his legs regain just a wee bit of strength. Then came the word of the enemy. Run. The old priest spoke, his voice seemed to be carried by the land itself. The wind seemed to carry his message, that it felt to Onyx like the priest said those words beside him, whispering into his ears. Run or feel our wrath. The roofs surrounding the crystal city suddenly opened to reveal 2 openings. Flee. The citizens ran. The soldiers ran. The servants ran. The lesser priests fled. Onyx ran, and he looked back at the mountain. Would the Crystal King answer their slight? Then the crystal mountain cracked. You have a lot of guts coming here. A gigantic crystal golem emerged from the mountain, as they felt the king's crystal presence push back against the 4. It certainly tried. You died today. Onyx thought that they were saved, but the feeling didn't last. The Crystal King's presence was overshadowed. The old man smiled, as the shadow of the tree that seemed to be around the man grew even larger. The buildings of the city trembled and cracked. Onyx couldn't believe it, but he saw segments of the magically enchanted walls crumble, not from an attack, but from the weight of the tree's presence. Even the giant crystal king staggered. You. The voice that followed was thoroughly alien. It was not the old man, even if it was spoken through him. The voice that emerged, that all of them heard clearly in their minds, was spoken as if it passed through the rustling of leaves and the whispers of the land. A million ancient trees spoke at once, its voice echoed in every one of their minds. You once said we would come as invaders. The Crystal King raised a spear of crystal so large that it could have been a tower of crystal. Your prediction is correct. The towering spear of crystals was thrown towards the old man. With it, the weight of the Crystal King's history. Everyone could feel the immense magic of the Crystal King, condensed into a single strike. But roots emerged from the ground, and the roots intercepted the spear midair, entangled it with its roots. I was keen to let you be. But here we are. Do you feel delighted that you predicted correctly? The giant Crystal King rushed ahead, stepped on the buildings and crumbled walls, and pushed at the spear. Even more magic was channeled into the spear, but the wall of roots that held the spear did not move. The Crystal King struggled. I should have killed you there and then. The old man's chuckle could be heard throughout the land. The land itself laughed with him. Little rocks, bits of sand, the grass, all shook as if laughing together. Killing my avatar does nothing but enrage me. My fury arrives eventually. It was a clash of power, all in a single move. The king's spear, and the wall of roots. Invader, I will not submit. The Crystal King roared, the crystal's magic glowed. Yet, Onyx swore it looked like the spear's magic was sucked about by the roots. So be it. The roots emerged from all over the city. It broke through the rocky tiles, it broke through the ground. They wrapped around the giant Crystal King. The lesser golems, the elite guards all wanted to attack. But the two archers fired a rain of paralysis arrows that stunned all of them. Those that managed to dodge the arrows were wrapped by the roots, and those roots paralyzed them as well. The Crystal King's power wobbled. My death will shatter the pact. Death is too easy for a hard-headed fool. The roots wrapped around the Crystal King's arms, and everyone screamed when they saw those roots rip the left crystal arm off the body. Onyx couldn't believe it. It wasn't possible. Then the roots wrapped itself around the right arm, and it ripped it off as well. It flung the crystal arms to the side, throwing them away as if it was trash. The Crystal King's energies glowed, as it regenerated both arms. You think this will hurt me? The roots wrapped around the entire body of the Crystal King. Then this will. The entire city shook as they felt a huge amount of magic was sucked out of the world around them. The roots drained magic, even from the Crystal King. Yet the king was defiant. Onyx watched, as a root emerged from the ground, far larger than any others. The root transformed into a spear embodying the world, and in a single loud thrust, it pierced the Crystal King's golem body. The sound that followed was as if the entire world had cracked in half. May this pain be eternal. Onyx wasn't sure what happened, but there was a huge amount of mana flooding the Crystal King. It wasn't demonic, but instead, it reminded Onyx of the Dark Nights. Your domain protects your soul, but your body remains vulnerable. How ironic. I was just in your position not too long ago. The gigantic golem of the Crystal King crumbled. The citizens and soldiers of Myelga watched, dumbfounded and in horror. Many have fainted. Onyx stared at what remained, held by the roots. A spherical crystal no bigger than a basketball. So this is your true form. A spherical crystal that gained a will. A wall of roots that emerged, and encased the spherical crystal. For the crimes of tampering with our preparations and attempting to assassinate a hero, I, Eon of Treehome, imprison you for the next 100 years. You shall remain a watcher of the world, while your empire collapses around you. A giant tree grew on their mountain of crystals, and this giant tree held a single object in its canopy, surrounded by vines and roots. A tree, made into a prison, to hold the spherical crystal core of the Crystal King. A beautiful prison for the king, on what was once their crystal mountain, and turned the rocky, crystalline land of Myelga into a verdant, blooming hill. 264. Penal Colony. Year 262, Chapter 264. The giant tree that stood in the city of Myelga. A prison. The system recognized my attempts to imprison another domain holder, and warp the giant attendant tree into a special tree. The Crystal Prison Tree. From a distance, it was poetic. It was as if nature rose to defy the magics of the Crystal King. The once crystalline city of Myelga was now overrun with trees. The very act of imposing my will on another domain holder was exhausting, but he was weakened. Keeping an injured domain holder imprisoned was significantly easier, because most of its powers are used to heal itself. He was smug, at first. The domain protected his soul from normal things, but I could hurt everything outside of that domain. If you don't intend to kill me, then you can't hurt me. He bragged. His crystal core was like a dungeon's core. It stood imprisoned. He said, as I destroyed everything outside of it. Then, I discovered that a soul tree was indeed a special thing in the multiverse. After all, it's not every day that I had the opportunity to mess with another domain holder. So I did. I tapped the power of my soul forge, and with its unique power, attempted to pierce his domain. He was smug. He thought it wouldn't work like all my earlier attempts to deal damage without killing him. Then my roots made a hole in the crystal platforms of his soul. I could chip away at his domain. It would heal, in time. But at that very moment, the Crystal King's horror was palpable. Impossible, he cursed. But the domain could be cracked by my roots, when they were empowered by the energies of my soul forge. This told me one thing. My domain was not a perfect defense. It had worked against the demons so far because their attempts to corrupt my soul were not properly tailored to damage my soul. Even mana was just a bludgeon. Unfocused, even rivers of mana couldn't harm it. The domain is still an object of the soul, a creation of the soul, and a weapon attuned to the soul's nature could still hurt me. In fact, there may be a domain holder, made from some kind of soul or spirit, that could possess the ability to deal soul damage. The ability to hurt the soul directly. This sort of ability would be this multiverse's equivalent of destroying one's meridians and crushing one's energy cores. This was a dangerous power, and the cracking of the Crystal King's domain silenced the smug Crystal King. It released a pulse of energy that spread through the pact of the tree. A warning. How? Jonpu asked my little tree in his garden. How did you hurt him? Our souls are well protected and should not be damaged, yet I felt you crack his soul at that moment. In the same way I fixed a hero's soul. The soul forge. I told him, and the old pharaoh thought. You freed a hero, and now, you just soul damaged one of the three. That makes you a very dangerous existence. Some gods will not consider you a friend. Then I will have to avoid them. Easier said. Jonpu countered. You're doing some pretty dangerous things. Arya and Icebang's golem spoke her will. You're not afraid how this appears to the rest of us domain holders. It is what it is. He ordered his people to sabotage our actions. There are consequences. The golem of lilies nodded. Such consequences are mild. 100 years is but a fluttering of the eye. Heroes come and go. Yet, as I brought the two golems to my Elga, the Crystal King's senses were not dulled. I felt its attention. It looked in surprise as his senses brushed over the two golems. You've seen more existences like us. Of course. Which made you a fool? I spoke back. I offered you friendship, but you chose hostility. These are friends, both from my world. You seek to rule. He argued. I would prefer not to rule if I have to. In this situation, where he was imprisoned, I realized it was probably a good time to educate him, just like how I shared my experiences and visions with Jonpu, Lilies and Arya. It made the three of them see what I see, and gave them understanding. I would have preferred not to do this. Matter of time. He still argued as I bombarded his will with my thoughts. Over time, you seek dominion over me. Even if I offered friendship. The nature of our relationship will not change. The weak will submit to the strong. He blocked it with his domain. Stubborn piece of rock. Stella looked at the special chamber in the depths of my main tree, where Alka's body was being reconstructed. It was magic. It was the system at work. Wonderful, isn't it? I said. I tried to understand what was happening, but this was the system on autopilot. I had no input here, because he would be rebuilt exactly as he was. It is. Stella said. I stare and have no idea what's happening. I know. It's nice to stare at something dumbfounding and not have to worry about whether it's trying to kill me. Stella added. It's a great, how do I say this, relief. That is true. Every unusual or mind-boggling thing we've seen seems to be trying to kill us, one way or another. The sun rings, the demon comet, Multipus were all strange, wild things. And this is great insurance. If I have one of my trees survive. With your additional clones, you will. After seeing my recent abilities, I am not convinced it's that great a security. You're worried there's some demon that deals soul damage, that could hurt your soul directly, regardless of how many clones you have. Stella said. If that is the case, none of us are safe. I doubt it'll be that bad. Perhaps my domain holders would still remain, so long as I existed. My ability allowed regeneration of my domain holders. The system says they can regenerate, and I trust it. 3 worlds reeled from the consequences of the Crystal King's defeat. The once difficult human cities became instantly subservient. We would have a need for their lands and their supplies. Stella's eyes watched the stars, and noticed that the remnant comets decayed into even smaller meteors. Without a singular core to hold it all together, even the smaller rocks fragmented. But they were undoubtedly still headed towards Treehome. It would be the equivalent of planet Earth passing through a cloud of asteroids. A rain of meteors would be likely, and in the thousands, it would be hard to destroy them all. Still, if they came in waves, it was theoretically possible. So, after the large bomb building exercise, we redirected our efforts towards a series of construction work. Anti-projectile cannons, magical shields, and one of the largest bunker construction projects. The construction of bunkers brought back memories. Eon, do you really need the bunkers? The last time we built bunkers was decades ago, and it didn't help. Lozan joked, as he reminded me of the time when we built the bunkers, then Rotterdlands happened. That didn't help. But what else is there to do? I countered. We could also perform emergency evacuation once we get the trajectory of the meteors. Lozan laughed. Build a wall. That's just bunkers without the roof. The evacuation idea seems to work. Chung went into a spiral of self-doubt and avoidance. He refused to speak to us, but at this point, I expected it. He knew, of course. He wasn't stupid. I watched him try to drown himself in alcohol, but annoyed by alcohol being mostly useless to him. He needed something that could offset the hero class, in order to get drunk, but he refused to drink anything made with my leaves. Colette, Prabhu, Adrian and Kefri. Survivors. Adrian retreated back to Mountain World. Kelly left some things for him. Unlike the other heroes, Kelly didn't set up her own little kingdom. Instead, her ambitions were smaller, and she ran an elite adventurers guild, where the elites received hero items from her. Naturally, she was successful, and now responsibility for the guild passed to Adrian. A guild was a lot easier to manage. Politics present in nations were less so, with guilds, especially small, focused guilds that just attacked dungeons on Mountain World. You think Hell kill himself? Prabhu asked his partner as they rested back on Freshka. Nah, Colette said. Just give him time. A few years. Hell get over it. Find someone to love or something. The 2 mages worked on creating magical shields, as a contingency for the coming meteor shower. Their hero items were very powerful, and an array of space-based shields should deflect most of the smaller meteors. They had a large mansion with multiple workshops, for them to build all their stuff. Hero Forge did most of the work, but it's better with materials, plans and space for extra stuff. Yeah, Prabhu hoped. I hope he doesn't do anything stupid. You know he will. Just not overly stupid. Good point. Kefri refused to talk to him, and returned to 3 worlds. After long periods of being away from 3 worlds, there was something about the deserts of the Scorpionoid lands that felt like home. Kay, the designated successor, refused to get her hands involved. This is a relationship problem between the 2. Not something I can fix. I am staying out of it. I'd rather be recruiting new heroes. Chung was stupid. I just hoped he didn't walk down a path where he became stupid and dangerous. I've never killed a hero. But if I have to, I believe I can. Stella sent more Void Explorers out into the Void Sea, each in a different direction. There were some unspoken passive effects, such as the higher speed of Void Explorers, and how the Void Explorers also moved faster across familiar paths. In short, Void Explorers moved almost instantly when traveling on existing paths. We have to continue exploring new worlds. Only through getting more worlds, we could knit some kind of alliance together. My 2 new domain holders were on Lavaworld where they tested out their new abilities. Kafa and Izar were briefed, in totality, of our history, and why we do what we do. It was a recap of things they knew, and an affirmation of loyalty to the cause. To end the demons. Both were Valthorns. They joined us in our fight in their earlier years, rising through the ranks. Now they have reached the top, and we have to ask them to give even more. Domain holders. It made them demigods. They know it. They saw how I imprisoned the Crystal King, and I knew, even if they never said it, that my domain holders would think that they could be on the receiving end of that same treatment. The next phase of our plan, other than to survive the meteor shower, was to mount a second attack on the Sun Rings. Our intention, this time, is to either capture it, or destroy it. Unlike the demon's comet, This was a stationary object, and this time, we would be at the advantage. After the comet, and the meteors, we would be the invaders of the sun rings. I wouldn't know when we will be ready, but we will be. Mountain world, 3 world, lava world, tropic world. It was time to consolidate power. The demands for surviving the coming meteor shower was less intense than the first push towards destroying the comet. We still had leftover weaponry, and the bulk of the builders focused on space-based defenses. The significantly smaller size of each meteor also meant the odds of an existential crisis for Treehome was fairly remote. At best, we'd be dealing with tsunamis. So, it was time to do what I couldn't do before. To redirect my attention to domestic affairs, to test out my new abilities, and also, to prepare for the future. With my newfound abilities, I felt the bubble of reality around these worlds slowly expand outwards, and in doing so, it also extended my range through the void sea. My Valthorn builders finished the reconstruction of the Dwarven Kingdom's capital. They continued to complain about me, but rather than engage them, I decided to pull all my men out. I still had spies, of course, but if the Dwarven King continued on his path of hostility, he would soon find himself in an unfortunate accident. It left a bad taste in my mouth. Once again, I regret being so soft, when I should have been more forceful. Choice. There is an important line somewhere. When do we allow others to make stupid choices? From my point of view, there is always a stupid choice. I can see it, but that's because I have a perspective they don't. Or maybe, it's the other way, they have a perspective I do not share. One day, a demon king will spawn on another city. When that time comes, I will give them a taste of Lava World, and remind them why they should obey. If they don't, I am going to force them out. I will drag them out of their homes, screaming and struggling. I was wrong to allow them to waste my time. To waste the time of my soldiers, and put those who fight for me at risk. If given a choice between the life of those who fight for me, and the happiness of these citizens, I know I would choose to save the lives of my soldiers. Just like with the stubborn Crystal King, I was wrong. There are times when force is necessary. The world is a cruel place, and the demons would not hesitate to destroy us. I cannot allow these people to stop our fight. So, my Valthorns streamed into the human lands of the Crystal King. As he predicted, we came as invaders. We would collect their information, harvest their knowledge, learn their magic. They would not be happy. But time will undo most wounds, and mortal memories are short indeed. 265. Looping branches with pole. C 265 year 263. The year began with a rare congratulations from the system. Domain assessment completed. Faith computation completed. Congratulations on reaching level 250. Thank you for waiting. The system needed to coordinate. Availability of administrators. We will now start the special event. Closing square bracket. Then, I was brought into a strange room, where I met a very familiar old man. I wasn't entirely human anymore. I took the form of a tree, more than a man, even if there was a man at the center of it all. Matt. The voice sounded exactly the same as it was when I started. Mozart. I didn't know why, but his name was imprinted in my head. At that moment, another different old man appeared. Mozart raised his hand, and presented his friend. He was just as old. This is Bach, my superior. I nodded. It felt weird to nod after so long, but it came as naturally as breathing. It must be important for me to face two of the system's administrators. We come offering you a pact, as required by the system. Bach said frankly. It is a choice, first and foremost. I want to be clear that this is a choice. I nodded once more. Go on. For every soul that reaches level 250, and meeting relevant faith requirements, hero or otherwise, we offer a pact with the system. In this pact, you will no longer gain experience, but instead, your soul will be moved from the experience system to the world faith system. Of course, I once wondered what the gods were. If you accept, under this system, you will gain various powers, such as the power to summon your own heroes, subject to your annual faith point availability. Each world you rule generates a certain faith value, and worlds marked as your core worlds generate more value. The faith points can also be used to open portals, bless your minions and followers, or spy on other worlds. You will also gain a spectral form that allows you to move between worlds where your faith is strong. But I remembered that conversation with Ava. There was a catch. Tell me more. What are my duties? You will defend worlds with your followers. You will summon heroes when there is a demon king. Define defend worlds. Tell me the details. What happens to me, if I say yes? Bach nodded. You are required to contribute faith points to the hero summoning pool, which will be used to summon heroes. Each world is measured in distance to you, and the further those worlds are, the higher the faith point consumptions will be. What if I have no followers at all? As a god, you die. How many followers do I need? It's arbitrary. The system calculates a sustenance value, and if you drop below that, you will weaken over time and then die. Damn. Even with my protections and clones. Yes. Some of your abilities will be remade in order to fit under the world faith system. Bach explained. Some benefits will be lost, but some gained. I paused. Why do the other gods accept this system? Because it allows them to be everywhere, instead of just one place. Most of the old gods were from the first living beings, in an era where magic was turbulent, and the myriad worlds were much smaller. Yet, over time, the worlds expanded, and the old gods struggled to protect their people from the incursions of the other gods, and later, the demons. So, together, the world faith system was made, a pact between that system and the old gods, to allow them to continue functioning in an expanding world. I realized that since this man was willing to give a history lesson, this was the best time to ask. What are the demons? How were they made? Bach clammed up immediately. I cannot answer that. But if they were around since the era of the old gods, that meant they were a long time ago. Can they be defeated? I cannot answer that. Can you tell me about history? Why is the world expanding? System momentum. Bach answered. The expansion is driven by subtle repulsive energies of the void. This will continue until the void can expand no more. Wait. I paused. How did the gods ask the system to create a new system? How does that make sense? Can it still be done today? Bach paused, before nodding. Yes. But it requires significant and majority control of all populated worlds. Explain. Bach paused, before explaining. In Earth terms, each planetary core is a node, and a vote. A right to vote. A right to petition. Control of the majority will of the worlds allows the gods to subconsciously, or consciously, submit changes to the system, and change how things operate. The bigger the changes, the more votes from all the cores will be needed. Most changes, racial creations and so on, will not require significant votes. But creating new systems, creating entirely new rules on how powers work. Forking the system. That needs significant control and influence over multiple worlds. I don't recall ever voting. The cores collect your responses subconsciously. Wait, can't we delete the demons this way? I asked. If each planet is essentially how the system responds to changes, it should be used defensively. I cannot answer that question. Alright. I get it. I can reach multiple worlds with my current abilities, why don't the gods do it? They couldn't. They were not trees or corals that could clone themselves, and so, they changed their forms to accommodate. The world faith system came later. Yes. And most gods are on it. Yes. Bach answered. Are all gods on it? A long pause later, Bach answered. No. I paused. If there were gods in the old system, they would be powers in their world. Incredibly powerful, but likely, constrained to a single world. What happens to all my powers? They will change. What are the other benefits? Quasi-immortality. Just as you die when you have no believers after a certain period of time, you cannot be killed as long as you have enough believers. Faith points will allow you to attain immortality, and regenerate any lost or destroyed body. I could see why some gods took it, especially if they had no means of immortality prior to this. But that was of no value to me. That's it. Power of the world faith system. It is a very powerful system that harvests the emotions, faith and beliefs of those who believe in you. Each temple, each faithful generates these faith points, and you can spend them to generate miracles, summon heroes, create worlds, open paths across the stars, and even permanently link worlds together. The power to create more classes, awaken more powers. Again, powers that the current system could offer. But, if there are other systems, then surely there are more. Are there other systems other than these two? Yes. The demons system. They grow in strength over time. Shit. If the demons have their own system, it meant they were significantly more powerful than I expected. I didn't realize when I said it out audibly, much to the chagrin of the two system administrators present. Well, some wouldn't consider them to be an entirely new system, but they exist on top of the existing experience system. That's why their souls are different. Their system has modified it. But with each additional world they control, they get a bit closer to making more profound changes to the system. Bach said. It explained why they captured worlds. And so what do you think? No. It was clear to me since the day I met Ava, that whatever they had didn't give them a path out of this. I could seek their help, but their hands were tied. But they could offer it to my domain holders, when they reached level 250. They could be new gods. Bach paused, somehow reading my mind, and then was quick to explain. They will wither and die. They must create their own faith, and grow it to a critical size. This option is not available to those without their own faith, even if they reached level 250. I see. If lilies reached level 250, they could be one. Urjanpu. Must I decide immediately? Yes. The system only offers this choice once. That doesn't seem fair. I can't even discuss it with my team. I asked. The old gods, those old powers were not the kind that kept a council. Bach smirked. It never occurred to them to do so, when they petitioned the system to create this subsystem many eons ago. Then is there an option to revert back to the old system? The old gods were not the kind to believe that they make mistakes. Bach's grin was frankly unmistakable. I believe they still don't think they made a mistake. That sealed it for me. Well, no, I don't like it. And I didn't need the immortality benefit. Not when I already had it. The fact that it was a created system, instead of the original system, suggested that it probably wasn't as well made, either. Confirm rejection. Yes. Good. The old pact of the old gods has room for improvement. Too bad those in it are no longer able to influence how the system developed. The basic experience system continued to evolve over time as each node submitted and petitioned for changes, while the world faith system remained largely the same system as it was made eons ago. Bach smiled. You will be receiving your level 250 subdomain choices now. You could have just said so. I said. The pact required me to offer it as a choice. I was brought back, and the choices appeared immediately. World faith system migration has been rejected. We will now display level 250 subdomain choices. Subdomain. The dark void. You gain the ability to see worlds that are shrouded by the voids, and also void worlds, and plant your clones on them. Your clones will not be consumed by the void. Your mana potatoes will now be able to store void mana with no loss or decay. Clones on the void worlds can harvest void mana. You are also now able to access the void layers, which are different ways the void appears, and can share it with your void mages. The special class, Voids of Eon, will be created, and void mages can unlock them. Voids of Eon can travel in the void layers. Void worlds can only be safely explored by those with void magic protection. The dark void will link with your fellow void domain holder, amplifying her abilities and allowing her access to all your new void abilities. Subdomain. Trinopticon. You gain the ability to see through your familiar, your beetles, and anyone with an Eonic class. In addition, you can also now see through your flows of mana. You can now communicate telepathically with anyone in the world, wherever they are in that world, regardless of distance, so long as your clone or avatar is present in that world. Your mind-reading tree's range will now cover the entire world. Each of your clones will also now function as the enhanced equivalent of a grand mind tree, granting significant automation and computational power. Mages, domain holder link through your Trinopticon will able to leverage on your range, granting them ability to cast spells through your network of trees as if they were there personally. They will be able to see and cast spells through your avatar, clones, or trees. Domain holders may not use domain tier abilities through Trinopticon. Subdomain. Unity of the Pantheon. You gain the ability to form links with your fellow Pantheon members, and express your combined powers as though you are one. The effects of all the levels and base stats of the Pantheon members will be combined additively. This power will require a willing mortal host. The host's endurance depends on his level, and the amount of power used. Domain holders that serve as the host will be significantly empowered by the combined powers, but will need to undergo intensive regeneration after each use. At level 275 and level 300, you will be able to select one of the unchosen choices. Choices available at level 300 will be deferred to level 325 if you elected one of the earlier subdomain choices. Choices are cumulative, and earlier subdomain choices are not removed. Shit. I want all of them. Stella said. The question is, which first? Which helps us get ourselves across the line faster? Lumuf thought. Can we first talk about that world faith system? Kay immediately stepped in to speak about it. There is an entire system out there that's only available to gods. Lumuf frowned. I believe turning it down was the right choice. We've seen the consequences of the old god's method of work, and it's not great. But think about it for a moment. Functional immortality. A power Eon grants to us. Not every society of gods has an Eon. Kay countered. But seriously, are we seriously getting power of friendship with that last one? Lumoof chuckled. I suppose my prayers did come true. You're hacking. Stella smiled. But it would be amusing to raise one of us to be one of them. It also implies that it is possible to alter the system, if we control sufficient worlds. Lumoof nodded. I cannot recall ever seeing the system change, but the fact that it might be something that occurred so slowly over time that no one ever noticed. I agree. If subtle changes are applied over a long period of time, we wouldn't even feel it. We'd confuse any changes to our abilities to our higher levels, age, or just upgrades to our skills or our class. It was the equivalent of environmental changes. It occurred so slowly that natives would adapt. The system must have been different, many years ago, the core principles unchanged, but the nitty-gritty aspects may have changed. Those outside the system, such as the gods who are on the world faith system, may not notice such changes. Technology's effect would bleed in slowly, as the system absorbs such changes. Lumoof sat and thought about it for a while. Batu may be the candidate closest to achieving conversion to the world faith system. He has an entire world that worships them. Even more than lilies. I soon shared this knowledge with Jonpu, lilies, Arya and Icebang, and even the Crystal King. I figured there was no harm. The Crystal King listened. Lies. Jonpu merely mulled it over. It seems we have been played with. I suppose he meant the fact that the WFS requires the gods to protect their worlds anyway, so the pact was unnecessary, even if it gave some natives power over the heroes. Kefri mused. Nice feeling, isn't it? Jonpu's golden eyes glared at the scorpionoid heroine. She smirked back at him. What? The taste of your own medicine is great. Or must its suck be to manipulate it? Jonpu stewed. 266. Twined Serpents. Year 264. The first of the Earth mages from Uleran reached level 70 2 decades ago. Now, the first of them, that same Earth mage, reached level 90. The limits of their soul. Anything beyond here, would require the soul strengthening seed. Ulerans, despite their tinier size, seem to have a far higher level limit than humans who capped at around level 80 to 85. I suspect it was the nature of their souls. Level 90. I offered the not-so-young Uleran, Kapakulartajam, or Cobra, as his Valthorn classmates referred to him, a soul-strengthening seed. He accepted, but requested for a return to Uleran before he took it. With my new abilities, there wasn't much to think about. I could easily place a node tree on Uleran, while keeping my clone trees for more strategic locations. Still, I tried to wrangle some benefits out of Snek. So that hero class. Will you trade it for a node tree? I offered, in plain and simple terms. There was no need to overcomplicate it. If he accepted, I will place the node. If not, I wouldn't. Snek paused, thinking it seriously. There was some movement of Ulerans between Treehome and Uleran, facilitated by the Rift Gate, but there were times when the Rift Gates were inoperational, due to unknown reasons. The Void Mages call them Void Storms. It doesn't do much, other than make teleportation impossible, and frankly quite predictable. The vibrations tend to start small, and slowly grow in intensity over a few months, before coming down again. Snek, initially, hoped to consult with those on Uleran, whether he had the right to give it away. After all, his mission was performed at the instruction of the old lords of the dens. But centuries later, most of the Ulerans refused to even consider it theirs. It made him feel a little abandoned, and a little bitter towards the whole hero class. All that sacrifice, for nothing. At this point, it's your choice. I said frankly. I am not sure what it'll do with the hero class, either. If you want, you could use it yourself. It was an idea Snek opposed. I am not worthy. Then no one is. I answered. Snek sacrificed his physical body to save his world, endured the Void Sea, and succeeded when many others failed. If he wasn't worthy of the class, who is? Even the kids who received the hero class were not the kind that would sacrifice themselves for the cause. It's only because of the hero class intervention that warped their minds into this demon-killing machine. He couldn't decide. Not yet. But, through one of the Rift Gates, we sent one of the Ulerans back anyway. Snek and Lumoof followed along. The first of our offspring to return to Uleran as a warrior. Ularsawabasars, or Snek, watched, as the first of the Uleran children, taken from their home decades ago. Lumoof smiled. Do you feel proud? The little Snek nodded. A little. But our world is not free. My hope is by fostering contact with the wider network of worlds, my people would once again regain the pride that they lost. I want to remind them that they were once surface dwellers, that we once built our dens under the sun, instead of the depths. There is pride in enduring even the harshest of oppression. Lumuf countered. For my people, it is not enduring oppression. It is accepting their place, and that is just sad. Cobra looked at Snek. Old one, what do you think our people will think of me? He had spent a long time on Treehome. They would not know what to think. But once you show them that we can stand up to our demon dragon occupiers, I like to believe their minds will begin to change. The party of 3 returned, and first thing was for Cobra to visit his old family. Unlike Snek, Cobra went with them as a child about 4 decades ago. When he returned, his family, still living in dens, were shocked to see him. But Ulerans had something in common with lizardfolks in terms of biology. Their scales correlated to their power. Powerful lizard folks have shiny, healthy scales, and the same applies to the Ulerans. Uleran scales manifested the elements of their class, which meant that Ulerans pretty much announced the type of class they had on their scales, by color and shape. An earth mage like Cobra had shiny, brown and bronze scales that flickered with magic. Snek and Lumuf allowed Cobra his space, but eventually, the Den Lord approached Snek. Old one. Den Lord Ularlis Intendic. Snek answered. Ill cut to the chase. What happened to the rest of them? Still not ready to return. But they will. Kapakulartajam says some of them are not doing well. Not all were as talented as I hoped. Snek countered. The world on the other side is highly advanced. The Den Lord answered. Snek nodded. I'd like to invite more to travel over, if I may. And return them like Kapakulartajam. Glistening with power. At that point, Cobra joined the two. He greeted the Den Lord in the Uleran way, which was some kind of strange hiss of their forked tongues. Den Lord. Old one. The Den Lord looked at Cobra. Would you choose to stay permanently in Ulera, or with these travelers? Cobra paused, and then answered honestly. I would like to stay with them. If I may, I'd like to request permission to bring my entire family over. The Den Lord stared. What? Den Lord, I do not mean to challenge your authority. Cobra answered. And, unlike the old one, who still hopes of reclaiming our homeland from the demons, I believe I'd like to give my siblings and future offsprings the opportunity I received outside of Ulera. Snek stared at Cobra, feeling betrayed. Kapakulartajam. Those who chose the old ways can stay, old one. Why create conflict? Why upset the balance? Cobra countered. It is better to just move. The protection, security, opportunities and facilities are just so far ahead, and having lived there for the past 3 decades and some, I cannot imagine coming back to Ulera. Snek wanted his people to return as heroes. As liberators. We are supposed to rebuild Ulera. There is nothing left for us here, old one. Not when we've seen what's back there. My friends, they feel the same way. Having tasted the fruit of prosperity, how could we ever return to the harsh life of the tunnels? The little snake spirit felt heartbroken. Yet, it was the exact answer the Den Lord wanted to hear. I see. I happen to have a list of individuals I'd rather get rid of. Feel free to take them. Snek stared at the Den Lord, equally furious. Was he using this facility as a means of removing people opposed to his rule? To some extent, we treated the Ulerans with kid gloves, especially much earlier on. There was always a Valthorn on standby, to step in if things ever got too dangerous. Snek said we could not afford to lose any of the Ulerans. I thought 1 or 2 deaths were expected, especially after all these years. After all, lifespans and accidents are a thing. So, kid gloves. Valthorns watched them like hawks, but as time went on, the Valthorn presence was just insurance. The once young Ulerans adapted well, though they are still an incredible rarity on Treehome. After all, there's less than 100 of them on Treehome. We would like a permanent settlement for them, somewhere. Not Treehome, because it's way too crowded and too high risk. If there were large-scale Uleran migrations, it would be to Tropicworld. It remains the single, safest place of all. With no demons. The only downside was generally weaker ambient mana, but that was a problem that I could fix with my new Subdomain ability. I was now nourishing the world's health. A healer of worlds, literally. Cobra and Snek exchanged some rather unpleasant words, but ultimately, Snek couldn't force them to do what he wanted. This was what you wanted. I reminded him. Not at the price of abandoning Ulera. And not splitting our society into 2. Snek answered. I did not envision this. I hope to restore Ulera to a single united Ulera of the past, with the aid of knowledge, technology and weapons of the wider world. The little Snek went through much. Your people have minds of their own. He sighed, in a way a little snake creature could. By flapping his head about. I spoke about my dreams, but it seemed my fellow Ulerans have their own. They didn't see how they could change their world. I answered. I believe this could be a good thing. If there is an alternative Uleran society, the original Ulera could be convinced to change. This is just like training Ulerans, but at a larger scale. Build an Uleran nation far bigger, far more prosperous, with far more population. Then, let them retake Ulera. Snek paused. That would take decades or centuries' time that I am not sure my world has. I think it does. I answered, as Lumuf spread my roots through the Uleran dirt. I've gotten better at sensing a world's health, and I was fairly certain Uleran would last at least 4 to 5 centuries. A planetary core wasn't a weak thing that would crumble so easily. It's a node, a key to the wider system. The right to vote. Now that I know what roles the world played in the bigger picture, it made sense that demons would prefer to occupy than destroy. They just needed the core. Everything on the surface was ultimately expendable. It was for this reason they didn't hesitate to destroy us, because we're useless to them. But, as long as they don't destroy the core could be healed, and then, the world rebuilt through the powers only a planet core has. Lumuf turned to face the little Snek head on. We will assign administrators, builders. Take the Ulerans to Tropicworld. Rebuild the old society of Ulera from those willing to follow. There is no other way. There is none that would work, not in the short term. Play the long game, just like you used to. Snek paused, and realized Lumuf had a point. Very well. Snek's announcement of his intentions to the not-so-young pioneers like Cobra and his peers, actually won support. Most of them were a lot more optimistic than the idea of retaking their old world from the demons, and so, the pioneer Ulerans agreed to be Snek's messenger. To take the message back to Ulera, and collect those willing to go. It was true that the Den Lords had Ulerans they didn't like anyway, but ultimately, there was little risk. With the Valtrian Order ultimately underwriting their security and providing the basic infrastructure, they would not have to start from scratch. And so, about 15,000 Ulerans, from the various dens throughout Ulera, went to Tropicworld and set up their first city and nation, from unclaimed lands of the Tropicworld. They named their fledgling nation New Ulera, and their first city, Newton. I hope they made something better, and don't constrain themselves to what Snek had in mind. What their old society used to be like, should be a reference point, but it is not dogma. We should be taking out these demon mothers as much as we can. Stella's next focus was to reclaim the demon worlds. Each demon world ultimately supported the demon's voting bloc in the system. There is no need to act hastily. I countered. The system moves slowly. Changes happen over decades. Let's take worlds that we can hold. We had to take stock of where we were. After my clone vanished on the demon's comet, it now sits in my reset timer. I'd have that clone back by year 271. Where are we now? I took a moment with my artificial minds to review the status of everything that's in play. We faced a wave of meteors, and there were already large-scale constructions throughout Treehome. The Void Mages have restarted the moon base, without my clone, but they didn't need it. It was good for them to practice setting up a base of operations without my involvement, even if that meant they were totally away from my observation area. Once the moon base was operational, they would start construction of the space-mounted weapon arrays, and the plan was to move those weapon arrays into location from the moon. Mountainworld is doing fine, and would face a new Demon King much later, only by year 268. That's another 4 or 5 years to go. My spies and agents are actively working the message into the general populace that we will not tolerate another Dwarven King-like incident. We were still recruiting. Well, so luckily, the incident didn't really dent how we were received. 3 worlds recently had their Demon King, and they wouldn't need to deal with one up until year 278. With the Crystal King imprisoned, my forces quickly began to set up shop in Myelga, effectively claiming it as my own. It was surprising that a giant attendant tree could hold the domain holder, but then again, all I did was destroying its outer shells and attempts to regenerate its limbs. I left its core untouched. I was fairly certain it had magical ways of communicating, which I could not block. But a message was sent, and the world was a mess. One thing was clear, I was going to make changes that the Insular Crystal King didn't like. First, I wanted trade, and so I commanded that the war with the Sandpeople to cease immediately, and next, that new trade routes opened. The Sandpeople had robust trade networks within their own cities, and the same applied to the humans and centaurs. But trade between the three was tense and dangerous, and so it didn't occur all that often. There were, as always, Those who tread those sensitive lines, but they were clever enough to stay out of the limelight, and never transact in anything too high risk. After all, when it came to demigods like the three hegemons, no argument would ever really pass muster. Jonpu was both relieved and worried, and I could tell. Open trade and communication between the three races of Threeworld had never occurred in the recent centuries. The last time it happened was many millennia ago, in a time when the gods' touch was strong. The centaurs couldn't even muster a response, as their own centaur leaders scrambled meeting after meeting whether to oppose us, out of respect for the old pact, or to side with us. But trade was something they accepted. They were still recovering from the consequences of earlier Demon King attacks, and they needed all the advantage they could get to restore their land. Then, there's Tropic World. This was the brave new world, the world restored. Canary, humans, and dwarves claimed most of the land, but there was more than enough land for me to carve out a large area for the new Uleran nation. The Canary reacted to their presence generally well. These dog people had enough land, more than enough that the Canary lands fractured into 4 nations about 5 years ago. Still, not much fighting broke out, since everyone was busy building up their own level of strength. The fact that Tropic World's terrain continued to change, as the core's strength recovered, meant most of these settlers have enough environmental issues to deal with. I thought of sending them to the Houndworld. Canary, after all, seemed like a natural fit for that sort of core. But I chose not to reveal its existence just yet. From my experience with the Canary, who are generally territorial, they would likely demand the Houndworld entirely for themselves. They may even view it as their promised land. Or perhaps I could dangle it as a reward, position myself as some kind of guide to their promised land. Would that win their loyalty? Regardless, the new generation of Canary were friendly, and in time, once we were ready to properly repopulate the Houndworld, I would allow them first cut. Then, there's Lavaworld, my hell, and also where I conduct my demonic experimentations. A land now filled with demonic trees. Other than the now improved mana situation, I wasn't sure what to do with this world. I could attempt to free it from the hands of the demons, by mounting an offensive to the core. With my stronger forces, it shouldn't be much of a risk. Still, for now we hold this world as it is. Cometworld remains traveling into the far distance. I think I've gotten my trajectory wrong, Stella said. What do you mean? I asked my void holder. I should have thought about it, but when we arrived at that beast world, where the native deity claimed that they are out of range of both the gods and demons. Yeah, I shouldn't have missed that data point. I think that I should be sending my void explorers in the other direction instead. Looking at the data I have now heavily suggests that the gods are on the other side of the demon sun. Shit, can you get there? I had hoped that reaching the gods would be the equivalent of getting the cavalry. If they are on the other side. I mean, I am going to start redirecting 2 of my new void explorers in that direction. It's also likely not all gods are in that direction anyway. There might be some that we can reach. I said. There's nothing to do but try. Stella nodded. Yeah, that's what I thought. But the one that's still going, I'll let it keep going. Yup. We probably need to plan how to use my node trees. I can fire my node trees like little seeds, but we'll have to find a suitable place. If the gods are really are on the other side, I could fire my nodes in that direction. Oh wait, I can't. They'll slam into the demon's barrier and burn. I'll have to hop around the barrier to reach the other side. As for the void archmages close to a domain, it's time they start doing more risky stuff, along with our new domain holders. Kapha and Izar can help explore our new worlds. Got it. 267.1 Interlude, Gathering of the Domain Holders. Lumuf assembled the group that now forms the inner circle of Eon. In a place not far from Freshka. Lumuf looked around the quiet room in one of many secret Valthorn fortresses around the central continent. Edna was the first of them, and Lumuf the second. Then came Stella, Rune and Johann. Alka, now Izar and Kapha. 8 of them, lifted from mere mortals, and now transformed into demigods. Alka was still asleep, waiting for his revival. So, the 7 gathered. The air in the room was thick with power, that anyone else would feel as if their air was suffocating. But each of them felt nothing. Their domains protected them. There was a sense of comradeship that they shared in the great struggle of their kind. Ian's words, revelations, really, of what the greater system was, only amplified the urgency and importance of their cause. The demons could essentially unravel the entire system, once they conquered enough worlds. The gods, elevated to a different system, are resisting, but have handicapped themselves. Should Arya or Lily's avatar be here? Rune asked. No. They would not understand. Edna said. Our power was gained through war. Through Eon's assistance. Theirs from a longer period, from things outside war. How do you two feel? Kaffa glanced at Izar, both peers. Incredible, and yet, overwhelmed. Rune just gave the two a pat on the shoulder. No words were said, but they've all been there. I will not spare you the niceties. At this point, there's really no point. The scale of this war is far, far larger than even what we first expected. Each time Eon pushes a little further, we've only see this war's scope expand. Edna said. When Eon first spoke of his goal, he only sought to end the demon's invasion of Treehome. Lumuf nodded. And yet, it only set us on a path of even more invasions. We are still not safe. The two new domain holders gulped. Stella nodded, and then she spoke up. I asked Lumuf to gather us here for a few reasons. Eon believes we have time. Stella said. The new domain holders looked at each other. But my sense now, it is a risky gamble. We don't know how much time we have, and what is the current balance of power between the demons and the gods. My models suggest that the demons already control around 1/5 of the known realms, and they continue to expand. We need to start invading demon worlds, and free them from their demon mothers. Kaffa and Izar looked at each other. This wasn't too bad, so we need to start retaking demon worlds. They've seen the demon mothers. They've fought simulations in Eon's Dream Academy. They could do it. Edna looked at Stella, and then at Lumuf. As Eon listening, Lumuf paused. At the moment, no. Good. That's just the battle part. There's something Stella isn't saying. The domain holders present gulped. Lumuf looked at Edna, and sighed. Edna, let me handle this. Edna just smiled. Sure. Eon relies on us, to ensure he doesn't stray. Lumuf answered. More specifically, he needs our presence to tell him where he has gone wrong. As someone who has shared minds with Eon, it is an overwhelming sensation. To see time as if it's just weeks, to see all the worlds at once, to feel all the things all together. It's absolutely overwhelming. Even with all my expanded and borrowed mental abilities, it is still too much to take in. Rune and Johan looked at each other. So did Izar and Kaffa. So, Eon tunes it out. Eon delegates certain thoughts to his mental assistants. Some of them, to us, to the Valthorns. I've shared those thoughts, and at times, I tremble at the power and knowledge I have at my hands. All the domain holders gulped. The bomb was coming. Edna only sighed. I alone cannot be Eon's moral guide. I share too much in his thoughts. I lean too close to his power. Lumuf answered. I try, but there are days when I blend into that avatar mode, and I feel his thoughts, his senses, his ideas, and I feel like I am him, and he is me. Though I believe in Eon's divinity, I do not believe in his perfection. Eon doesn't make very good choices. Edna said. Perhaps he has become too focused on the demons, or perhaps our lives are too short that what seems like a short moment of suffering doesn't matter, if the goals are achieved. When years are just weeks, a year of suffering feels like nothing. Lumuf looked torn, but nodded. That's where I need all of you to come in. We, the domain holders, and his inner circle, are the only ones that can steer him back. To remind him that there are other perspectives. To balance the needs of those present, and those of the future. To take things back to the small, instead of the big picture. Because, from Eon's zoomed out perspective, it's all just little bumps in the sand. Izar spoke up. Eon would not listen to me. No. You're wrong. He will. Because you are now a domain holder and a member of his pantheon, and believe it or not, he trusts all of you. Lumuf said. We are the ones that can accompany him on this quest. We are the ones that will be there for the day we put an end to the scourge. Do not sell yourself short, Izar. We must speak, because Eon, unchecked and out of touch with time, will be. Edna completed what Lumuf couldn't put the words to. Horrifying. Horrific. Kaffa gulped. That seems a little harsh. Edna looked at Lumuf. The stakes have only increased with time, and Eon prioritizes our survival. The difficult choices, such as that whole incident with Ken, that hero friend, we will just see more of them in the future. The priest and avatar nodded reluctantly. Eon is a creature of nature. And its sole unwavering ethos is survival. Above ethics. Above values. Above morals. All these things are that can be discarded, if the circumstances deserve it. He would sacrifice thousands, millions, if it ensured the rest survived. And there lies the clear issue. It's all up to us in the end. Edna said. Us. You may feel overwhelmed, Izar and Kaffa. You may feel this power is immense. It will feel terrible that I am pouring cold water on your achievements. But it is our reality. Even as we stepped into the realm of the gods, we were just at the first step. We are still too weak. Eon was blackmailed by Chung into keeping Ken alive against his will. The reason that can happen is simply because we were too weak. We needed that selfish hero. The domain holders glanced at each other. We must achieve combat power equal to or above the heroes. I spoke to him before Eon allowed him to pass. Stella elaborated. To Eon, keeping him alive was like a doctor putting a man on a horrific medical treatment for a week or two. It's nothing. He doesn't think it's a big deal. Maybe to us, extending one's life by a week or two through painful medical procedures isn't suffering. But that is Eon, on a larger scale, with longer timescales. Very few things are a big deal. Very few things are a big deal. But Ken lived it. Years, he endured Eon's energies swirled in his body, forcing him to live against his will. The Void Mage continued. It was intense. It is suffering, even if most of it was asleep. Stella looked uncomfortable. We understood the circumstances. The demon's comet was too dangerous, and Eon needed all hands and all the tools. But it is a terrible choice, and in the future, we will only have more such choices. This time, it was Ken's life. Someday, it will be someone else. Worse, someday, it'll be more than the life and suffering of one person. All because we are weak. Edna repeated. Strength is the answer. Eon doesn't think so, and would not say it so bluntly that we are weak, but in the larger scheme of things, our contributions have been limited. What do you have in mind, Edna? Rune said. The hurdle we need to cross is simple. We must be able to take on a demon king without assistance. That will allay the bargaining power of the heroes, and prevent future blackmails from less friendly heroes. The present group of heroes are generally on good terms with us, with the Order, but someday we will face heroes that turn against us. I even suspect that Chung would turn against Eon very, very soon. Edna explained. The remaining domain holders are quiet. Izar and Kapha have secretly practiced battle against heroes, and generally came out to a loss, or at best, a stalemate under perfect conditions. The sheer firepower of a hero was insane, and in combat simulations, only Lumuf, Alka and Edna managed to win in specific circumstances. Alka mainly wins by taking the heroes down with him. If we can do so, it would allow us to fully move away from the fading gods and the need to support heroes, because we can do so ourselves. It will also give Eon better options, and we can then steer Eon towards better decisions. Izar asked. How far are we from that? For you too, at least 50 more levels. Edna answered. For me I am not that far. Lumuf and Stella too. If each of us can reach level 200, my current knowledge indicates that is the point when we are on par with the heroes. In a straight fight, we can hold our ground, and depending on what powers we receive, even produce the damage and destruction we need. Oh Eons. Rune looked at Edna. So when's the next Demon King? I didn't need a pep talk, but now that I got it, I want to go kill some Demon Kings. The one on Mountain World. Yes. But that's not all. We will go and free up more worlds, take on the Demon King, and collect a loose alliance of allies. Eon needs new worlds, and he takes too darned long to decide. Edna explained. Stella. Yes, yes. Eon already wants more void domain holders. We're getting there, Stella said. Void mages don't grow on trees. I wish they did. Edna laughed. I really wish they did. Edna smirked. No matter. The issue of the other worlds is important to us. Us domain holders will be Eon's emissaries to the new world. Eon, I sense a growing resolve to handle things more decisively, but I fear for those worlds. Kapha sat and sipped his thick tea uncomfortably. These other worlds, worlds that do not have domain holders, or have weak ones, their fate is an eventual doom. The gods will fade, and they will fend for themselves. Ultimately, our decision on how and what to do with these worlds determines the lives and fate of those who live on them. If we ignore them, they may live on, but someday, they will be destroyed. If we establish relations and decide to maintain a position, we can support their defense, and hopefully, train some of them up into future domain holders. Edna stopped just to drink her cup of water. I know Eon believes that each world deserves a choice on what they want to do, and if they want to fend for themselves, they should be allowed to do so. But that's Eon's thoughts. If you are asked to choose to establish a presence on a world, deal with all the troubles that come with it, for that remote chance of saving them in the future, would you do it? Rune looked at Edna like she was an alien. Shit Edna, I didn't think it's that. It's just the harsh truth. Eon's presence is like giving an orphan child an opportunity to train to be a Valthorn. Most of it turns out to be average. But some of us are here today. Man, if only. Eon doesn't have clone seeds for all the worlds. Even with the node trees, there are more worlds out there than we can count. We will be visiting more worlds with Stella's powers, and that is the weight of our choice. If we feel strongly about something, we must speak to Eon, because those are lives that will fade away unnoticed. Edna explained. Lumoof glanced at everyone, and chuckled. With Eon's level 250 choice, he would only be assaulted with more information, more decisions, more worlds. I hope there are more of us here, eventually. Because this duty weighs heavily, and I'll need all of you to help scout the path ahead. I don't mean just Izar and Kapha. I mean all of us. Because we need all of us to act as a stabilizing force for Eon. Combined, Eon will definitely listen. Stella nodded. This meeting wasn't meant to put you two on the spot. I generally echo Edna and Lumoof's thoughts. Only together, we can balance this ship. Because there's nothing else. Kapha tapped his chest. I may not know whether I am up for it, but I will try. Izar nodded along. Rune and Johan looked at each other. You three should really tell us more about all that shit that goes on in your heads. You can't just unload this on us suddenly. Lumoof smiled. I apologize. But after tapping into Ian's avatar mode a little too often, I realize I cannot be trusted to be objective. I need all of you. Rune and Johan gulped. Well, I'll tell you for sure if you fucked up. Please do. Worlds get fucked if we fuck up. Lumoof said, mimicking their language. It's a burden too heavy for me to bear. 267.2 Interlude, Lizardfolks 3. Ever since they returned to Branchhold, Wetport Lapool never faded from his mind. Chief Yon dreamed of the place, and there are times he daydreamed of it. He could get little glimmers of it in Branchhold. There were many other lizard folks in the world of Mountainworld that did the old ways. Yon saw it, when he saw new groups of migrants. He wanted to try it, but his heart was unsure whether the matrons would support him. He summoned the matrons, and asked them for their views. He didn't conduct a vote. He wasn't that daring. He still couldn't let go of his role as chief, and as chief, his role was to decide. Perhaps one day, where the next generation of lizard folks were all strong, powerful lizards, he would have to relinquish his role and decide by vote. But for now, he asked for views. And he listened. To his surprise, it was the eldest of the matrons, the oldest one that found Wetport Lapool to be a model worth following. She was most enamored with the idea of a great lizardfolk city. A lizardfolk nation that even the greatest of humans or the other races would fear. It was ego. Pride. She had pride in lizardfolk. They wanted that. They wanted to have pride. There was a saying lizard folks heard too often. In battle, one man is worth many lizardfolk. It was true, of course. But it was also an insult that gnawed at them personally. That each of them was worth less than a man. But now they know that this was not the only way. No one in our world tried to walk the path of the strong lizardfolk. The eldest matron declared, if the gods grant us the vision of how it was done, then it must have been for a reason. Yon thought that was a little on the nose. Eon guided them there for a reason. Education. In fact, he even felt maybe this was what they wanted. So he challenged the matron then. Even if he would have accepted it normally. What if this is what the great tree wants us to do? We're falling into its trap. It wants us to be like the lizards of Wetport Lapool. The matron nodded. But if we are strong, who cares whether what the great tree wants? Do you not forget why we moved away from our old home? Because we couldn't protect ourselves from the demons or the old kings. Every war, we send our younglings away to war, where only a few out of hundreds return. Why? What for? What mother would do that to their child, if it is not a necessity? Younglings are younglings. They live, and they die. Those were your words, matron. They are not true lizardfolk until they return from war. Yon called out the matron then. It was hypocritical of her too. She wasn't one to care about younglings. In fact, she was the cruelest of them all. The other matrons looked at the eldest, a little surprised. But she answered, we do what we need to do to survive, Chief Yon. Our hearts cannot take it to lose so many of our own for wars fought by others. So we respond with cruelty. We kill ourselves to allow it to happen. But do you not see that the other way is better? We could be like the other races. We could have strong children. And this price you will pay for it. Yon remembered her words. We will lose our traditions. We will stop being the lizard folks of Mountainworld, but more like the lizard folks of Wetport Lapool. Yes, I rather have one child who can step into the heavens, than 100 who will die in the wars. The traditions can burn in the depths of the hellfire swamps if they don't work. Matron. It was another matron who rebuked the old matron. That is too much. Our traditions brought us where we are today. And they will be inherited by the millions of lizardfolk rotting away in their villages all over Mountain World. The matron countered. How many times have you met a famous lizardfolk, only to find them lacking? The unspoken answer was all the time. Famous lizardfolk on Mountain World was at most level 70, and even at level 70, they were weaker than their peers. Remember that lady? The matron looked at Jan. The class 1. Of course he remembered. She was a living goddess. Just like that lizard Valthorn. Kapha. Now that was a living god walking amongst the lizardfolk. I will trade her for any famous person. No. All of them. The matron said. If we had someone like her, we'd finally be able to build the foundations for a proper lizardfolk nation. But we don't. Jan countered. Alas. The matron said. We have you. Jan frowned. I am still the chief, matron. I'll let that insult slide, this time. But the foundation must be built. We must try. The first generation of new lizard folks will set the path for generations later. Then, Mountain World will witness the rise of a new kind. Jan sighed. It sounds like you agree with it. The matron nodded. The rest of them were a mix. Jan closed his eyes, and decided to go for a walk. After a while, he felt he needed more evidence. This was such an upheaval for the lizardfolk way that he needed to be sure. So, he asked for another trip to Wetport Lapool. The Valthorn Guardian of Branchhold repeated, and then he checked the travel approvals. We have a travel vacancy in 2 months. Come back and arrange your move. You will only be able to return after 6 weeks. 6 weeks, Jan said. But ultimately, he arranged for another of the matrons to be in charge. In the safety of Branchhold, there really was nothing much for Jan to do. Branchhold was no village at the threat of monster attacks. Branchhold was in many ways a fortified supercity. One of the matrons laughed. Go, chief. Well, be free of your meddling for 6 weeks. Stay longer if you want. The matron teased. Without the existential threat of monsters or demons, Jan had to admit he spent most of his time being a busybody, poking into the affairs of every other lizardfolk. He called it being informed and concerned, but his matrons just said he was a busybody. Fine. He frowned. The day came. He nodded at the officer, and felt himself warp over. Tree home. The air. The stench or lack thereof. It was beautiful. It was the first time he traveled alone, and this time, all he got was a single Valthorn chaperone. The chaperone was a lizardfolk from Treehome. Greetings. I am Solvis, your assistant for the duration of your trip. Please, do as you please. My task is mainly to ensure your safety while you remain on Treehome. Jan and Solvis Claus met briefly. Well met, Solvis. I'll be headed to Wetport Lapool, and if I can, visit the other lizardfolk nations. Solvis nodded. Certainly. Let me guide you to the beetle stations. Please. Wetport Lapool once more, and Jan rubbed his nose. The stench of the city had pretty much marked itself on his nose ever since the beetle entered one of the main freeways that led to the heart of the city. He wouldn't have a fancy rich man to guide him, this time. This, in many ways, was a personal trip. He wanted to see the city for himself. Whether it really was what he wanted to create back home. Solvis merely grinned, when Jan explained his quest. I am not sure what you are looking to find, Chief Jan. This city, well, it's quite like diving into the belly of a giant swamp monster. It stinks. If you want what lizard folks could be, this isn't it. Jan chuckled. Of course. Some lizard folks of Treehome, themselves aspired for a different kind of life. Solvis spoke of those who migrated out of the Wetport and back to the small villages, where they tried to blend both the city and the old village ways of the lizard folks. The irony was not lost on him. Even if it was baffling. And hilarious. There was an old saying among lizard folks. Be happy with the tail you have. Not that anyone follows it anymore. Well, your quest starts here. District V. The ports of the Wetport. True to its name, the piers, the floors. Everything was wet. And slimy. The ship's waves caused the slimy liquids of the sea to wash up and stick to the piers and the docks. There were groups of lizard folks wiping and cleaning, but only in 1 or 2 piers. Those are the more exclusive piers. Solvis laughed. When you're rich, you can afford cleaning services and magical spells for your landing docks. Jan frowned. Are you able to help me? I don't know. Get in touch with some pirates. I want to speak to them, just to find out what's life like here. Solvis shrugged. Just go to a bar or a tavern, Chief Jan. Pirates and scum aplenty. But, let me hold your money for you. What? You're going to get pickpocketed in a bar. Especially with your kind of money. Jan had gotten used to the relative tameness of Branchhold, and realized he may have had a bit more than he expected. He decided Solvi's advice was wise, and handed his pouch over, except for a little bit of coin. At that point, another Valthorn agent appeared. He took the coin, and then vanished. He gulped. Who? The city general assistant for Valthorns. We have folks like that in every city to help us out with mundane stuff like banking. That was more like a spy. You can call him that. Solvi's laughed. Come. Let's get you to the inn, and the innkeeper will have recommendations for the best bars for lowliest scums of the swamps. Jan paused. You don't like the pirates very much. They are a nuisance we tolerate. Solvi's said. Much like every other nuisance on this damned planet. Are we a nuisance? Solvi's paused and laughed. To be fair, everyone's a potential nuisance. Eon believes in the principle that nuisances promote growth. That's why he tolerates it. The challenges created by nuisances are obstacles that others overcome, and so we gain levels. It's part of a cycle. Without an adversary, we can't improve and gain levels. Oh, Jan said. The innkeeper was more than happy to recommend a few famous taverns, but apparently some of them wouldn't have an empty seat. Not for a nobody like Chief Jan. High-level Valthorns don't usually participate in taverns, though most of these taverns would happily make space for them if needed. Unable to decide where to go, Jan sat in the inn's dining area. It was quiet. Most lizard folks used the inn as a place to sleep. Daytime was time for business. Evening was time for drinks and mingling with powerful lizards. He looked around. The inn itself was rather well decorated, if dated. But Jan glanced at the innkeeper, a lovely old lizardfolk lady, and realized, maybe he should start somewhere nearby. Actually, madam, I'll buy you a drink if you'd talk to me. The innkeeper, Madam Squama, gladly obliged. Why, I don't really need an excuse to drink with my guests. She laughed. How long have you been here, Madam Squama? Call me Miss Squama. I refuse to believe I am 70. The madam of the inn laughed. You're 70. Wow. Jan was surprised. He was old himself, having seen wars and death of his own. But Miss Squama was older than the matron. He sighed. I am Jan. Tell me, were you here from the beginning? She laughed. No. No one alive is still here when the Wetport began. It's been here for as long as it has, but it was still a city. There were many kings and old lizard lords that ruled from this city. Really. The Wetport used to be home to 3 separate lizard kingdoms. On this side with the old lizard city of I can't remember the name, I believe it's Lapa or something. Then there's the Pula clan of lizards on that size. Then there's the Miran clan somewhere further upstream, along the river that meets the Lapula Bay. Ancient history. They all died. Oh, Jan said. That sounded very much like their own lizard kingdoms. What changed? Do you know how this place became this Rottedlands incident? Miss Squama explained. And the subsequent lizardfolk repopulation program. I was one of them. So that answers your question. I wasn't here. I was brought here by the repopulators. Jan soon got a rather extensive overview of the history of Wetport Lapul. The city went through many ups and downs. Mostly downs, due to typical lizardfolk infighting. Then, the Rottedlands occurred, and vast amounts of lizardfolks died overnight. The Order decided that they wanted to restore lizardfolk population through vast breeding programs, and selected Wetport Lapul, then the cities of Pula and Lapa, as one of the suitable habitation grounds of the new lizard folks. The Order was way too strong for the local lizard kings to resist, and those that attempted to resist were swiftly killed. In the end, the Order gave the old royal families noble titles similar to the other nations, a cut of the bay's taxes, and in exchange, the old families relinquished the management of the entire bay. It made those old families rich. But as with all typical lizardfolk families, that money was squandered away in internecine struggle, and within the past 100 years, only 1 or 2 heirs of the original 3 royal families remained. The vast repopulation program, the privateer project, Eons swamp expansions, and the one of the Valthorns Naval Academy, somehow caused the stars to align, and the Wetport Lapul's status as the de facto capital of the lizardfolk was sealed around 4 decades ago. Jan stared, realizing that the city came to be due to luck. How much of this bay is our choice? All. Madam Squama laughed. Many chose to move here. The repopulation program ended decades ago, and the Wetport has tripled since. Most of those who are here, came here on their own will. People like me, were the minority. Solvi's, who was happily listening. It means Madam Squama is filthy rich. The old pioneers still receive order stipends. Squama frowned. Shish. Don't say that part out loud. Jan appreciated the lesson, of course. It was context. It explained how it all came to be. But it didn't answer the doubt in his heart. Do you think this Wetport made lizard folks better? It was Madame Squama's turn to stare at the middle-aged chief of the branchholds lizard folk. Better. I don't know about better. If you ask the youth, they'll tell you it's better here than the villages. Here, they have opportunities. They have jobs. They have a chance to make something in a larger market. But if you ask those like me, some of us miss the quiet life of the villages. Jan frowned. He remembered his nomadic life in the villages. I'll say none of my matrons miss the villages much. It's a life of constantly fearing for demons or the human kingdoms, and breeding younglings for other people's wars. The innkeeper looked horrified. Which part of the central continent are you from? Lizardfolk villages were officially direct protectorates of the Order since 8 decades ago, and lizardfolk youngling forced drafts by non-lizardfolk nations were banned around the same time. Solvies clarified. He's a visitor from the other world, ma'am. Squama's eyes widened. Oh, the burning Eons. So that's why you have a Valthorn bodyguard. You're an actual otherworld lizard person. I must call my friends. They will want to meet you. Jan instantly felt like he had outed himself as a circus freak. That won't be necessary, Madame Squama. I'd like to visit in peace. No, I have a friend. He's been curious since forever, and he's been waiting in line for a ticket to visit. He's been cursing those damn tour quotas every year. Jan glanced at Solvies. Tour quotas. There's a limited number of travel slots between worlds. It's a lottery. But there are different schemes. But I got it. Outbound travel from Treehome's really popular with the nobility. Solvies said. Inbound travel less so. Eventually it'll be a lottery on both ends. Squama ran to a crystalline rock and tapped in some things. Hey old Vervis. Come to my inn now. There's an actual lizardfolk from the other world here. What? Really? I'll be there. Squama walked to the magical shelf, and took out 2 more bottles of wines. Since old Vervis is coming, gotta open up the old swamp wines. Made from real snake blood. Solvies squirmed. Not my thing. Squama offered it to Jan. Jan took a sniff and it smelled absolutely like vomit. No thanks. Old Vervis walked in barely 10 minutes later. He looked like a war hero, with scars throughout his body, and some of his claws were missing. Old Vervis. This is Jan. He came from Mountain World. Vervis' eyes looked at Jan, examining every part, absolutely bewildered. Holy cow. It really is a Mountain World lizard person. You even have distinct bumps in your shoulders. There's a bump in his shoulders. Both Solvies and Squama asked at the same time. Jan didn't realize it, but now that he did, the bone structures of the lizard folks were slightly different. Hidden under armor and shoulder plates, it wasn't an easily visible difference. Huh. Vervis stared. Have you ever tried breeding or mating with our world's lizard folk? Do you know whether it's possible to mate? Jan couldn't believe it. Wah no. I have not tried. Squama gave Vervis a glare. Old Vervis. So that's why you wanted a trip to the other world. You wanted to touch scales with some damned alien lizard folks. Vervis immediately looked offended. No. It's truly an academic question. Then why is it your first damned question? Jan and Solvies just glanced at each other while the two bickered for a bit. The 2 old lizards were clearly very old friends. The 2 eventually calmed down. I apologize. It was something that's on my mind ever since the Order revealed the presence of the other worlds. I've been curious to meet other lizard folks. You see, I used to be a pirate, but then, along the way, I realized I was fascinated by all these old remains and lizard bones, and so I left piracy and joined one of the magical research institutes as an independent research assistant, focusing on lizard bones. Squama clarified. It means he's the mage's bodyguard, most of the time, even though he tries to do his own research as well. Hey, I am a level 26 lizard bone analyst and a level 34 pirate warrior. Jan paused, and asked. You are allowed to take 2 main classes. The 3 lizard folks present now gave Jan the judgy stare. But it was Vervis who intervened. Ah, that makes sense. Pre-Rottedlands, village lizard folks also didn't have role flexibility. To answer your question, Chief Jan, yes. We do. City lizard folks can change jobs and roles. But how do the villages ensure their needs are met? We pay. Vervis explained. There's a lizardfolk merchants guild that helps to match classes to jobs, and so lizard folks move around to fill the role, and if the pay's no good, they leave. Jan was surprised, but then realized there was no village chief to stop them. In Mountain World, every villager reported their class to the village chief. The village chief would then assign tasks in accordance with their class, and if they developed new classes, the village chief could reassign them. But that hardly happens. The idea of lizard folks moving from village to work. That was even more wild. Lizard folks of Mountain World stuck to their own cities, and when the village moved, almost all moved together. Those that didn't, would find a new village. In that kind of world, what do village chiefs do? Jan asked, wondering how his own job would change. Vervis drank the old snake wine like water. He burped. The stench almost made Jan vomit. I believe they just coordinate jobs, hirings, resources. As long as everything runs, who cares, right? But that sounds as if there's no relationship between the chief and the village. That is a drawback. Vervis acknowledged. Jan didn't like that. That was power taken away from him. If every lizardfolk had no loyalty to the village, then who were they loyal to? 268. Bilateral engagement. 268. Year 265. More Lumuf's travels. Another one. Lumuf nodded, as he checked his equipment. Where's Kaffa? On the way. Stella nodded. Though I am sure you will be enough, we do want to increase our team's experience. The Void Lady smiled. Kaffa and Edna both walked in. Both of you. Edna shook his head, but Kaffa nodded. The new lizardfolk domain holder was ready. An exploratory trip to a new world. Most of the time, it was Stella, Edna and Lumuf that did the visits. But Stella found more than one world, and so, there would be another team. Rune, Izar and Edna would go to the other one. Stella had to be on standby for the demon meteor shower. Stella's void explorers, now 3 of them, moved faster. There would come a time where they'd most likely discover more worlds than they could explore safely. Ready? Never. Lumuf chuckled. Off you go anyway. Stella laughed, and the void portal sucked them through. They landed in what appeared to be a lush field of greenery, teeming with life. Bugs. Insects. Kaffa looked around, and sniffed. I sense a great disturbance in the fabric of reality. Lumuf nodded, as he felt it too. He expanded his senses, tapping into the grass and the bushes, and felt it instantly. It was very far away. Reality. Both of them experienced how it felt to have reality tear apart before their eyes. There were ripples everywhere. Something is wrong. And they both know it. But this world shouldn't be like that. Lumuf reached out and sensed the world's core, and felt it intact. Lumuf briefly looked up to get a sense of their location. This world, discovered by the Void Explorer, was not linked to any others they know. But it was linked to 3 other worlds. There were paths they could see. Kaffa tensed, sharing Lumuf's vision of the stars. But there are no demons. Then what could it be? Lumuf looked back, as a cloak of magic appeared around him. To most people, he was as good as invisible. Kaffa's scales transformed. Its lustrous scales functioned as if they were the scales of a chameleon, shifting color to match its surroundings. Camouflage. The pair rushed through vast forests and fields of animals. They moved, sensing the unusual disturbance in the reality of space. But as they got closer, they began to sense the source of it. It felt like powers similar to the void. A native void mage, Lumuf said. It was not impossible. Void mages can occur naturally. If there was some kind of people like the Zeratins. Lumuf's eyes widened. The information was relayed through the artificial mind network and they returned with a confirmation. It matched most signatures. Zeratin. It was a land of life, but as they sped up, they heard the roar of battle. Attack the creature. The command came from a dwarven warlord of some kind, surrounded by an army. There was a gigantic Zeratin in a half-dried lake, attacked by the natives. The natives were dwarves, and they had cannons. Those weapons bombarded the Zeratin, and the Zeratin attempted to defend itself with the use of void magic. But it was clearly injured. There were multiple deep cuts that had rotted throughout its body and signaled the presence of combat some time ago. Its use of void magic was different from Stella. It twisted reality in order to deflect the shells. Lumuf landed nearby and quickly tapped into my network of minds to figure out what was happening. We connected with all the leaves and surviving plants in the battlefield, and listened to the dwarven attackers. How long before we can cut this turtle up and make weapons out of its shell? One of the dwarves complained to the other. A bit more. Its magic is waning. This is it flailing at its last breaths. Another of the dwarven attackers said. The Lord commanded. Keep attacking. We must not let this opportunity go. The connected grass focused on the aides and sycophants around the dwarf lord. It's always lucky that aides and shoe polishers exist to recite the plan to everyone present. With the void turtle's body, we would be able to attack the void creatures in the depths and reach the ores. We'll finally be able to match the other dwarven lords in power. Lumuf looked at Kaffa. I'll provide aid to the Zeratin. Hold them off. Kaffa nodded, and in a blink, he was gone. The dwarves' cannons attempted another volley of attacks, but they all smashed into a magical shield. The lizard warrior activated a magical item that contained shield spells, and landed in front of the dwarven army. Cease this attack at once, and I'll let you live. Continue, and I will not be merciful. Kaffa said with practiced arrogance. His domain holder's aura radiated outward. Lumuf landed right next to the surprised Zeratin. Careful, Kaffa. The weight of your domain can hurt this injured Zeratin. The dwarves froze in fear. Old Zeratin, allow me. Its throat and neck was injured, but the moment Lumuf's hands touched its body, a link in the mind was established. It sent an explanation. This place was a trap. A place with just enough surface water for Zeratins to warp in, but not enough to provide cover or protection from their foes. Through Lumuf, my healing energy spread into the Zeratin's injured body. I felt his memory, and he shared attacks. We recognized some of them, and it soon explained through its thoughts. Demons, men, dwarves, mermaids and the trogs. This Zeratin has been attacked many times. I shared thoughts of our own. Valisira, the first Zeratin we met, and the old giant Zeratins. Stella, and the void mages. I felt its relief, and instantly, its resistance to my healing energies faded. My healing powers now moved unrestricted, and began to mend its old wounds. Healing injured old giants from old wounds would prove tough for even level 100 healers. But I am almost a god, and so, this was easy. The dwarves stared dumbfounded, as they watched the injured flesh of the Zeratin heal before their very eyes. Regenerated. The dwarven lord couldn't move. Kaffa's presence made them freeze. Though Kaffa was one, he had an ability to create little shadow copies of himself, and now those shadow copies were at the necks of the leaders. The Zeratin healed in about 20 minutes, and its voice regained. Its telepathic voice was linked to its throat, as if the means of projecting its message was in the throat. This Sunhilla thanks the tree's avatar. A friend of my fellow Zeratins is a friend of mine. Sunhilla spoke, fully healed. No longer injured, it no longer needed to warp reality around itself, and could resort to regular defenses. Our paths were enabled by your brethren. Without their guidance, we wouldn't be able to reach the stars. Lumuf answered. It is nothing. Such is the eternal cycle. Sunhilla spoke. Avatar of the tree, please touch my head again. I shall transmit a gift for your aid. Lumuf did, and instantly, I felt it transmit a copy of its memory of the local star system. A star map of the local area, with notations. I shared it with Stella instantly. Much appreciated. Lumuf responded. May it lead you closer to the goals you seek. The Zeratin said. I shall now take my leave. The dwarven lord struggled. No, you must not let it leave. We need its body. Without it, we cannot deal with the dark creatures beneath us. The Zeratin shrouded itself in a cloud of mist, and in a blink, it vanished. Lumuf landed back on the dried lake. Lumuf walked to the dwarven lord, and this time, Lumuf didn't bother hiding his aura. The entire dried lake shook, as water seemed to pop out of the dried lake. I am saving an old friend. Do you have objections? The entire dwarven army paled. The lord answered, his muscular legs wobbly. He whispered. In response. No, great one. Good. Now you will take me to your city, and tell me everything. Lumuf said. And show me these dark creatures you speak of. What? The dwarven lord shrunk. This was going to be hard to explain. This was a world of dwarves. There were no one other than dwarves in this world, and so, Kaffa horrified them. Kaffa, a lizard man, in their eyes, was a monster. Lumuf, with his tall height, looked like a giant dwarf. The dwarven lord reluctantly led them to the city of Greehold. Not only did they return empty-handed, they had to bring the potential enemy back home. Who are these people? The dwarven lord's court was filled with hushed whispers. That man is so tall, but his companion he is a monster. Lumuf didn't need much help to spy on those around him. The dwarven city was built into the mountain, and there were remains of old tree roots that he could easily tap into. Creatures guests. The dwarven lord of House Greehold clarified. Of the other worlds. They were able to speak to the void tortoises. Zeratins. Void tortoise. There were different names for the same things. We've called this world Dwarfworld, but we soon discovered they called it Delvegard, home of the Delvers. And you bring them back. One of the ministers of the Lord said. They will kill us if we don't. One of the aides defended the Lord. And risk the life of all who live on Greehold. But we didn't need interactions to learn about these people. With roots, with trees, we stalked the city and soon learned of the existences of magical mineral veins in Delvegard. The mineral veins all produced unusual types of metals, but they were also protected by the creatures known as the Darklings. Void weaponry, made from the body of the void tortoises, was one means of defeating the Darklings. The other was the use of the hero weapons. Heroes. There were heroes here, but the last demon king came to this world about 70 years ago. Lumoof chuckled to himself. If Stella was here, perhaps she'd be a goddess. Or any of our void mages. Kaffa nodded. They were given the most beautiful guest rooms, and they were escorted into an area. Thankfully, these dwarves of Delvegard were quite straightforward in their dealings. The actual meeting with the Dwarven Lord went as expected, at least, they didn't tell a lie, just an omission of truth. Darklings were creatures twisted by the void, and that was because in the depths of the core. The magical minerals came in a few variants. First, was sunsteel. These were the most rare ones, and they could only be found in the deepest of the magical mineral veins, where the presence of the Darklings was highest. They didn't know how it was made, but when Lumoof held the sample in his hand, it felt familiar. This looks like the base component of the sunrings. Lumoof repeated. It wasn't in its processed form. Next, was sunmetal. It was an inferior form of the sunsteel, where the ratio of those unusual metals had not been properly formed. They were found on the outer areas of the magic veins. Then the last one was the dark ore. These were often found around sunsteel and sunmetal, and they had intense light absorption abilities. Sunsteel and sunmetal were excellent weapons, incredibly magically conducive, durable and could store way more magical enchantments per size. But they had a downside. Once formed, they were not very easily recycled or remade. The magical enchantments were baked into their structure. Melting sunsteel turns them back to sunmetal, and melting sunmetal turns them back to ordinary metals. With each process, they turned into lesser, more mundane variants. Even the purity of sunsteel varied. Because even making them into an equipment required a bit of processing, and each additional process weakened the natural qualities of sunsteel. Most crafters that work on sunsteel essentially did it through a process called cold forging, where the metals are cut using a type of ice crystals. Kaffa looked at Lumoof. I believe we need Lady Stella here. I believe we do, Lumoof said. The Dwarven Lord proceeded to narrate why these metals were important. This, in many ways, was a typical Dwarven society, with a heavy emphasis on crafting, technology, and equipment. Sunmetal and sunsteel were critical for their prosperity, because it allowed creation of equipments capable of delivering more for less. Most crucially, they allowed the creation of the strongest of the Dwarven war machines. The giant spiders. Lumoof frowned at the mention of war machines, and asked to see one. The Dwarven Lord gulped. We only possess two. I will not harm them. Lumoof said. The war machines were gigantic weapons. They were smaller than the demon walkers, but big enough that they were easily one of the largest weapons. But their design was surprisingly elegant and slender. It reminded Lumoof of one of Eons' memories. A Protoss Colossus from StarCraft. We pack as much sunsteel as we can onto these things. The Dwarven Lord of Greehold explained. There was a Dwarven engineer who walked over. And these are your most powerful weapons of war. Yes. Lumoof once remembered Stella and the heroes spoke of a world that ran on steam and pipes. Of machines made of steel. But looking at the machine in front of him, its slender legs and small body, it didn't match what Stella told him. Lumoof knew that Alka could have made something better. Easily. In combat ability. Or design. But to achieve the same power-to-weight ratio, it would require a fair bit of high-level craftsmanship that only those in the level 100s could achieve. Do you all not have crystal weapons and crystal equipment? Lumoof asked. Curious. The dwarves look at each other. We do, but we mostly use them as a magical storage to power the sunsteel's enchantments. Lumoof's eyes watched, and the artificial minds quickly analyzed the data. It was likely that they needed sunsteel for the hinges, because the sunsteel offered significant performance without weight. The legs and hinges of the war machines were slender structures, only possible because of sunsteel. My priest looked back at dwarves. And why do you need these weapons of war? Well, other dwarves, of course. The dwarves of Delvegard were territorial, and frequently fought brutal wars. They tried their best to negotiate, but once war broke out, all combatants would pull out all their stops. In short, when they went to war, it's all or nothing. Kaffa was shocked to hear that the dwarves were so brutal and ruthless. They are nothing like the mountain world's dwarves. A different history, Lumoof commented. History is a shadow, forever looming over the psyche of society. Kaffa nodded. The two sat in a room. What do you think of this world, Kaffa? Lumuf asked. The lizardfolk closed his eyes. Hungry for war. Not that. How is this world valuable to us? Or it is not. That ultimately depends whether we intervene or not. Kaffa's eyes opened. Patriarch Lumuf, that is a question that is worth 1,000,000 lives. Probably more. Lumuf smiled. Our type of engagement is vast. Ignore and do nothing, which is the least engagement. Then, there's a trading relationship. Then, as a colony or vassal state of some kind. And at the end, full domination. There's also the friendliness of that engagement. Do we engage the locals? Do we ignore them? Do we send our own people because we can't trust these guys? Do we enslave them? Surely not. Kaffa reacted at the last word. I know. But the range of engagement remains present. It is a choice, even if a choice we do not like. Kaffa thought of that conversation with Edna. This was truly the weight of their task. They were now the eyes and ears of the Order, and the Order was a machine that would consume worlds. We need more information. That is also an option. Lumuf smiled at the younger domain holder. What would you do, Patriarch Lumuf? I will first propose a friendly relationship. A trading relationship to buy these sunmetals and sunsteels from these dwarves. Kaffa paused. Given how critical it is to their war, they are unlikely to agree. If the sunsteel proves critical to our war, they will therefore need to be conquered. Or at least, we will need to establish our own presence, and start mining these sunsteel using our own forces. Is the sunsteel that important? Kaffa interjected. It doesn't seem like it would be. Lumuf waited. Kaffa was right. It's not critical, but good to have. No, we have alternatives. But let us propose a trade, and we'll see how these dwarves react. 269. The Divine Traces. Year 265 Part 2. Edna's visits the world of Satria. No, I've had it with God's control over me, and I am not keen on it. All of this sounds like it'll take away time from me. Colette objected to the idea. Well, what was the idea? I rejected the offer to adopt the world faith system, but I realize, the ability to have an audience with both Bach and Mozart, was way more powerful. Through them, I could gain knowledge of the past, of history and of how things came to be. Sure, they were not willing to share a lot, but even if they refused to tell us that, the mere act of asking questions about the system, and understanding the mechanics of the system would allow us to make projections and plans. So, among the senior leaders, we thought of creating even more people like me. Level 250. It's a crazy number. Of course, by telling this, I reveal my power level to everyone around me. It's an act of trust, of course. But at the same time, I believe it is also an act of intimidation. The rest of the domain holders didn't even reach level 200. My fellow domain holders of the other worlds refused to share their levels, but from the weight of our presence, I was fairly sure they didn't exceed my levels. We approached the heroes first. I remember Bach's words that even heroes who meet the necessary thresholds could get it. I wonder how this is so, and whether perhaps, are heroes robbing the gods of the faith values, therefore they decide to remove the heroes once their usefulness is over. At some level, faith values make their control over the world a zero-sum game. Heroes, who, given a certain level of independence, could create their own faith with their God-given powers, and at level 250, rise to the point where they ascend. Their followers would compete in the same pool as the old gods. That's a horrible way to look at things. Kay acknowledged. Prabhu looked at Colette. Sure you don't want to do it? Colette looked at the growing child sitting on her lap. No, not at all. Kay sighed and spoke to me. To everyone looking, it seemed like she was talking to the air. Who else? We need someone who could have a religion built around her. Rune, Johann and Izar rejected it. All three of them didn't want to be a god of any sort. Stella thought it over, and decided that her void abilities seemed more useful than whatever divine shenanigans this system was up to. This WFS enables an old god to do everything alone, all that matters is the faith cost. Stella said. Because the old gods are solitary existences, they exist above and beyond their old societies. As I mulled it over, I realized Stella's observation is true. The old gods gained immortality, the means to open pathways through the stars, summon heroes, and tremendous combat ability. Whereas the experience system is intricately tied to the class, and later, the domain. This allows for a far higher peak, but much more narrow scope of abilities. In short, the gods chose width and breadth of abilities, over depth and focus. A pantheon, essentially, a team of domain holders with a wide variety of domains, should outperform the WFS. But if there was only a single person, the world faith system was truly the best choice forward. I believe the WFS is a good choice, in situations where we need a backup Eon. Stella answered. A lot of what we achieved today is because of the society change created by the Valtrian Order, backed by Eon. If we want to plan for a situation where we may have to survive without Eon for a while, one of us would need to take on the WFS, to bridge that gap. It's an insane idea, to raise someone up just to be a temporary Eon. Kay countered. A level 250 warrior domain holder per Edna's calculation, should be very, very strong. We're talking about a literal god able to deliver as much power as a full team of level 100 plus heroes. Edna, Stella suggested. She may not need it, but I believe if there's anyone worthy of a religion, or at least a mini one, it should be Edna. My void domain holder wanted Edna's order of knights to become a quasi-religious institution with faith in Edna's powers. Edna would be elevated into a patron deity of the Knight Order, and a group of Valthorn priests would have to start the process of making her into a saint or a goddess. An order of Templar Knights, in worship of a martial goddess. Edna squirmed at being made into a goddess, but ultimately agreed. On one condition. Let's do it outside of Treehome. I'd like to be a mere mortal at home. You stopped being a mortal decades ago. Stella countered. I mean, you understand. Edna glared. Stella chuckled. Alternatively, the other possibility was to elevate Kapha into some kind of lizardfolk god. Or god of the swamps. Or something of that sort. It was a long way to go, for someone like Kapha. He was barely level 150, while Edna was already close to level 200. It was a lot more sensible to try it with Edna, but, in many ways, we could do both. We would start to include both of them, as minor deities of our pantheon of gods. First was Eon, the great tree sheltered all that came after. To nourish the land, for them to grow. Then came Edna, our guardian protector, defender of the weak, and the shield of the tree. She was later joined by Kapha, warrior protector of the lizard folks. Edna squirmed. Everyone did. But the drafted story, the tale of a god, would be weaved. I really don't want this to spread on Treehome. Edna said with her hands in her face. It was incredibly embarrassing. I didn't like religious talk. It's cringeworthy. I hope they made better, less cringeworthy versions of the mythos in the future. Edna sighed. We should just add all the domain holders to the myth. That way all of us get a chance to gain faith. It was a fair assessment, and so the priests went back to the drawing board. Well, rather than dwell on that stuff, time for you to go visiting. My turn, I suppose. Edna smiled at Stella, then at the two men that would accompany her on their visit to the other worlds. Ready, boys. Rune and Izar shrugged. Izar tried to joke. It's my first time. Be gentle. It wasn't. He made many trips to other worlds, but it's their first time as the lead explorer. Edna laughed. When you're on the other side, no one can hear you scream. Izar paled. Rune just tapped him on the shoulder. You'll be fine. Stella smiled. Off you go. The world they visited was immediately filled with the stench of blood and war. Edna could feel it. In the ground, in the air, and feel the presence of battle. Rune and Izar glanced at each other. Rune's senses were the strongest of the three, but if Edna could feel it, it must be quite near. Why not scout it out? Edna proposed. Rune nodded, as his body turned into a shadow, and then vanished. Edna looked at Izar, and smiled at the new domain holder. Any thoughts about your first trip as an explorer and representative of Eon? Horrified. Izar answered. You should be. How we act, and what we do, shapes the native's impression, and vice versa. The brawler nodded, as they walked. There were trees here. There were markings left by blades and swords. Arrowheads were embedded into the trunk of trees. The trees have been used for practice. Edna took out a black helmet from her magical storage, and wore it. It gave her the ability to see the astral paths in space. This world was also connected to a few others. Stellar the Void Archmages would need to be here to investigate. Edna frowned, as there was the clear tale of demonic invasion. There was a bright path in the sky. The Demon King should be arriving on this world any time soon. Rune was back. Demons. As usual. There are local defenders. Pretty rough fighting, from what I can see. Demons appear to be the Sabnok variant. I've already spotted a few demonic encampments. The variant appears to have taken up demon knights as their form. Oh, demon armies again. Edna frowned. That's a tough one, generally. Smaller. Demon armies, actually. More like demon knight packs. Edna's eyebrow arched. Packs. That's somewhat unusual behavior coming from the demons. Izar sat and frowned. That should make it easier, isn't it? Small packs means less bodies to punch, it's a lot easier to just get rid of them. Rune nodded. They seem to have fairly high combat strength for demons. Each pack seems to be at least a champion level threat. The demonic leader looks to be somewhere around level 80 to 100. Edna's eyebrow arched again. So this is a Sabnok that only spawns champion level packs of armies. It wasn't entirely unusual, Edna thought. There was a time when the demons only spawned dragons, and those packs of flying demon dragons could easily be considered champion level threats. Izar laughed. They won't last very long. A few punches and we're done. Let's just go visit some and see. Keep our domains hidden. I'll try, Izar said. I don't have much practice. The group of three arrived in what looked to be a fortress city defending itself against the demons. The fortress looked fairly battered, with its massive stone walls that looked like they've taken damage for some time. There's like 6,000 people in that city. Rune commented. Almost all humans. Edna smirked. I've won the bet, then. Well, what else are we seeing? Izar looked at the battlefield. On one side, there was a group of 30 demonic knights. They rode on large demonic horses that had no face or eyes, but had sharp fangs. Its hooves were massive, and in some way, they looked more like bulls than horses. All of them looked to be waiting for a sign. On the other side, were a group of human defenders, dressed in similarly heavy armor. A few of them looked heavily injured. One of them rode to the front, and stood holding a large steel sword. There were about 100 of them, and yet, in a straight battle, it was fairly clear that they would lose. The demons were more powerful. Come get me, foul beasts of the dark. The knight roared, and charged alone. Edna, Izar and Rune collectively squirmed. He's going to kill himself charging alone like that. Then, only one of the demons rode to meet him in battle. What? The three domain holders could not believe what they were seeing. The demon brandished its dark blade. And that same blade clashed against the steel sword of the knight. They fought each other, and yet, it was clear that the human knight was losing. They exchanged about 20 blows, and the human knight retreated back, injured. The demon had somehow landed a few hits on the knight. Yet, the demon didn't chase. Instead, it returned back to its pack, and waited. This scene repeated itself as the second knight confronted the demons. What in the hell is going on here? Rune looked, and tried to sense there's great magic at work in this world. The three didn't feel it, because their domains had protected them. But once Rune mentioned the presence of magic in the air, Edna and Izar easily found it woven into the land itself. She looked at Rune and concluded the magic at work was out of their understanding. Not just that, it even felt like divine intervention. We need a mage here, ASAP. Edna pinged back home. Stella responded. All archmages on duty. We'll get back to you in a week. Edna rolled her eyes. Since when I couldn't override their duties? Treehome defense. Stella countered. Is it really that urgent? It's some divine shenanigans in this world. I want it looked at. Stella's eyes brightened somewhere on Treehome. That means we are close to the gods. And no, if it's divine shenanigans, I am not sending any non-domain holders over. Edna paused, contemplated Stella's reasoning and then sighed. Fine. Well, ask the natives. Rune looked at the city. I can sneak us in. Easy. But let me just check who should we disguise as. The ranger activated some kind of surveillance skill before concluding that there are merchants in this world, and immediately altered the disguises to match. Alright, let's get in. The three snuck into the fortress city easily, even as the battle against the demons went on outside. Inside, it was very quiet, as if most of the citizens had evacuated. Rune quickly approached one of the soldiers who walked alone, and asked. Hey there, soldier. Yes. There's a merchant. All merchants should evacuate the city. The combat procedures will end soon. Rune pretended to be Blur, and took out a little bit of coin. He had taken a look at the coinage used by the city folk, and managed to pilfer a few for use. Yes, about that. Can you tell me what's happening? Like it's my first time encountering this combat procedures, what's going on? Edna and Izar hid nearby, but their eyes listened in. The soldier laughed. Oh, I thought everyone knew by now, but in any battle, the attackers and defenders must first have 10 rounds of nightly one-on-one combat, known as the combat procedures, or some people call it the 10 jousts. If the attackers win less than 3 battles, they cannot proceed with the attack. If they win more than 3, they may proceed to the next phase of the battle, known as the assault. That's where the attackers may attack the city. The 3 domain holders couldn't believe what they were hearing. It was absolute nonsense. But why do we stick to it? Can't the demons just march in without care? The soldier looked at the merchant named Rune like he was an idiot. Is your village not protected by the great Hawa's divine flames, or the divine protection of proper combat? Even the dark demons are bound to it. Edna glanced at Izar. They were close to the god Hawa. What happens when they break it? They get weakened by divine curses, and burned by the divine flames. Weaker creatures will die. But, why does God not just crush the demons? The soldier stared at the merchant. That is blasphemy. The Hawa church will have you skewered if that ever gets out. Rune acted horrified. Ah, my apologies. Another coin for your silence. The soldier looked at the coin, and laughed. Very well, I heard nothing. But you should leave. Most of us are leaving before the last of the 10 combat procedures are over. Edna, Rune and Izar glanced at each other, wondering how the rules of this world operated. Most of the citizens fled, but Edna noticed there was a group of knights tasked to defend, rather than escape. They all had the resignation that they will die today. Do we just watch? Rune glanced at Edna. He was fairly alright just letting the natives die. She gulped, closed her eyes. No. Well, step in. The group of 30 demon knights charged against the walls of the city, and the walls held, for a while. The demons took a while and destroyed the fortified gates, and then charged into the city where the knights waited. But let us watch where we can. At the last minute, Rune and Izar said collectively. It was going to be a bloodbath. Then a burst of arrows and the group of 30 demons were slain. Rune, Izar and Edna arrived before the group of shaking soldiers, who were all prepared to die. They were shocked, but not immediately thankful. Instead, they asked, who do we owe the favor to, and what do you need for saving us? The three realized this was the best time to extort the knowledge, and demanded it. The world was bound by a great divine magic of Hawa, known as the bindings of Hawa. Each city with a temple of Hawa, a lord or ruler of suitable rank, and sufficient number of knights may activate the combat procedures. These combat procedures apply for a period of a week, and can be activated once a month, per city. The combat procedures force all combatants to engage in a multi-stage battle, first with the 10 jousts, then the assault on the city. Knights, priests, and lords who do not obey the combat procedures after activating them will be inflicted with a divine curse. Also, in order to fulfill the rules of the assault on the city, there must be defenders. Otherwise, the combat procedures will be cancelled, and the lord, and also priests, that cast them will suffer another divine curse. This was how cities throughout the world slow the demons' attack, because the bindings of Hawa could be used on the demons as well, and during combat procedures, interfering parties will be punished by divine magic. Because of this, the demons were forced to play by the gods' rules. In this world, knights are essentially Hawa's warriors. The knights of this world are an order of warriors who believe in Hawa, and as a martial group, they believe in strong fortified cities, stone temples. Priests of Hawa bless each and every city, and the Hawa priests of this world are particularly good at blessing stone walls, and knights. Knights who survive multiple jousts are awarded special skills by the system. The lords of this world are naturally knight priest focused as well. Many are either promoted knights or priests, so most lords eventually set up knight branches of their own, and build fortified cities. There must be a source for such powerful divine magic. Edna mused, resting in the home of the defenders. They were clearly glad not to die, so were more than happy to host the three. A few left the city to deliver the message that they have been saved. After interrogating the surviving soldiers, they eventually realized that they needed to visit the cities of the world. There are divine relics in this world. Rune concluded after summarizing all the interviews. A few of the kings control powerful divine relics, but the soldiers have no idea whether they are linked to this divine law. If the gods could do this, why don't they do it everywhere? They could essentially force the demons to obey certain laws of engagement. There might be some kind of faith point cost to maintain such a system, and it's only realistic solution if it's not too far from the actual god. Rune answered. We should just ask Stella to send us closer. Skip this world and find where the gods are. Izar countered. I think we should talk to the most senior priest in this world. If they can put us in an audience with Hawa, that would significantly help our cause. The knight concluded while she looked over a map of their region. This world was filled with many small kingdoms, with just a collection of a few large kingdoms. The land seemed fairly hostile, with multiple monsters, and there were even living dragons on this world. Rune paused. We should have Lumuf here, if we want an audience. Eons should be the one facing this Hawa. Agreed. Edna answered. But we should get information before we get to that stage. Stella will make the preparations back home, we need to get things ready. Let's fan out, and infiltrate more places. There's at least 6 different kingdoms with these divine relics. Are we stealing them? Izar looked unsure. No, right, no. Just investigate, send information back. Well, match it to what knowledge we have. The Order collected information on Hawa, Gaia, Ava and Nera over the decades. If there were some matching information on the Hawa faith of this world, it shouldn't be too hard to line them up. After some interrogation of the locals, the 3 also found that the locals referred to the world as Satria. Edna initially wanted to call it Hawa world, but then decided against it. It's likely this wasn't Hawa's main world, because Hawa's presence should destroy whatever demons. This wasn't Hawa's homeworld, but we were close. Then, just as Edna thought they were done with the unusual affairs, one of the soldiers revealed a strange piece of information. Sometimes, the heroes of this world were selected from the locals directly by Hawa, instead of summoned from another world. The immediate implication of this was that the gods could select heroes directly. They didn't need to go through the complicated summon mechanism. The Hawa locals referred to the chosen champions as Hawa's champions, and would receive a selection of Hawa's battle relics to battle against the Demon King. We must see the relics, and speak to Hawa. It wasn't hard for someone like Edna to get enough money, and collecting it from the dead was even easier. As she traveled across the kingdoms of Satria, she witnessed even more demons. In cases where the local defenders did not invoke the combat procedures, or ran out of the relevant materials to invoke it, the demons could easily assault the city. As a result, the demons were incredibly fond of night strikes, and especially strikes on cities that should have been safe. Then as she entered one of the more heavily defended cities, she saw warriors that probably could give the demon knights a good fight, and some knights equipped with divine relics. They were not stronger than Edna, that was for sure. A quick survey of their abilities suggested they were in the level 80s, but Edna felt the presence of divine blessing. Those are the Hawa Knight Templars. They are blessed by the high priests and granted divine powers. The traveler next to Edna explained to her. It seemed those who believe in Hawa generally have a high level of faith in the god, and thus appeared to do so. Edna's eyes noticed that the individuals themselves didn't appear to manifest divine powers, but this was the first time she had ever encountered someone with divine relics, so didn't have a good idea of how they stacked up in battle. But if this world had Hawa's chosen, they have not selected the candidates for this century's chosen. The traveler answered as Edna probed for more information. The war with this generation's demon only started 2 years ago, and it'll be some time before the 5 or 6 chosens are awarded an audience with Hawa itself. 5 or 6, sometimes. The traveler shrugged. He seemed to be a fairly knowledgeable merchant, so Edna kept him talking. The demons will come and linger for 5 to 6 years. Even the king of the demons has not descended yet. It hasn't. Edna paused, as the pieces came together. Back on the worlds where heroes were summoned, the gods summon them after the demon king arrives. If the demon king hasn't arrived on Satria, it naturally follows that Hawa wouldn't bother to choose its champions. But the gods clearly have a choice of adopting a different set of procedures for its closer worlds. What everyone thought was a normal procedure may just be something they had to do for faraway worlds where they had little information. Edna arrived in one of the supposedly largest cities on Satria after 2 months of travel. In truth, she would have covered the distance within a few days, but she did the long way to learn from the locals. Hawa's faith was ridiculously powerful in this world. Each city had Hawa temples, almost everyone believed in it, at least nominally, and many truly believed in Hawa's blessings. The priests themselves also appear more powerful here, with high-ranking Hawa priests wielding powers not normally seen in priests, as if borrowing them from somewhere. Milady, welcome to Museo, home of the royal family of Museo, and one of the 7 relic cities of Satria. Relic cities were names given to the 7 cities that hosted the 7 great Hawa relics. The one on Museo was home to an item known as the Chalice of Eternity. Edna could feel it in the air itself, the sensation of divine presence. From the intelligence that she gathered so far, the Hawa Temple of Museo was an institution that had power not inferior to the royal family, and the chief priest of Museo was a man of incredible faith. It would be difficult to gain access to the chief priest via normal means, since he was busy, and would not normally entertain guests. What would Lumuf do, if he was here on this case? Edna sat in her inn, thinking to herself. She considered her options. She could barge in. In terms of raw levels, nothing she saw so far even came close to her, but the presence of divine relics meant she didn't have 100% certainty. That would probably cause offense, and she would rather not do so, especially if she wanted to maintain a working relationship. After thinking for a while, she decided the best way was to visit the temple, and ask for an audience directly. 270. The Bloody Forest. Those that can't see in the darkness often remark how it is all black, but those who could see, often see in colors that couldn't quite be described to man. I would be able to unlock all three choices in time, and I thought to myself that the dark void seemed to be the power I needed the most. I've struggled with the void for all this while. Our pace of expansion is dictated by the void. Our travels through the void is the clear limiting factor of how we could visit new worlds, and eventually, the conclusion of the council was fairly decisive. I would select the void. The dark void. The selection itself was immediate and quiet, but what immediately happened soon after was the appearance of black lightning over the skies of Freshka. Void lightning. A single blast to my first body. I wonder whether this was heavenly retribution. I felt my soul, already separated across my clones, began to change, and the view of the void came instantly. One moment it wasn't, and the other, I suddenly saw the different shades of darkness in the skies above, in colors I couldn't quite see. My immediate description of the void layers was magical photo filters. This was like looking at photos of the stars with infrared or ultraviolet light. They revealed things that were not there before, or in different places. Each of these filters revealed a different version of the stars, with different locations. As I shared it with Stella, she immediately understood what this was. This is the different perspective we've been looking for all this while. It's hidden behind a domain ability. I thought about it, and perhaps, it could be a domain ability for me, but there may be certain races or species who could see the different void layers themselves. Stella immediately began to experiment on her newfound access to the void layers. We were all very excited to see the new worlds hidden within the void layers, but we had to be prepared. We were not sure what exactly lurked on the other side. Eon finally has mechs, Prabhu said, amazed, as he watched the magical construction emerge from its hangar on the moon. My Valthorns outdid themselves when they built the first moon base, and they outdid themselves again when they constructed what was the first orbital battle platform. We were expected the first of the remnant meteors to enter our void teleportation range soon, but given that they were such small objects with hardly any bubble of reality, we felt the risk of engagement in such a situation was too high. With such small bubbles of reality, even if we succeeded in destroying them, we wouldn't be able to flee in time. It's likely that their reality was very fragile to begin with, and so, my void archmages recommended against attacking them in the void sea itself. The best area of engagement was once they entered Treehome's now expanded sphere of reality. This was, in a way, the equivalent of letting the meteor enter our solar system. The means of engagement were these orbital battle platforms, the first few usable space warships, and these mechs. The mechs were not really mechs, but instead, to facilitate the heroes in their movements and survival in space. They were only made possible due to a combination of clever crystalwork from our crafters. I wish we could make mechs with our hero forges. K, on their shared communication network, responded. I could. You guys just need to work around your limitations. Each hero's hero forge was different, tailored by their assigned power sets. K, being the ship girl that she once was, could make mech suits. Basic ones, but mech suits nonetheless. For Prabhu and Colette, their weapons were smaller. Kefri didn't want to participate in the defense of Treehome. She said she had things to do back on Three Worlds, so, we didn't force her. Similarly, Adrian had his own set of tasks back on Mountain World. Chung, well, being Chung, he decided to ignore us altogether. I wasn't bothered. But Prabhu and Colette tested out our first mechs. They struggled, and we had to send the mechs back to the workshop to work on the synchronization. In theory, mechs and golems are pretty much the same thing. But golems ultimately were controlled by their masters, and so that system facilitated the control and manipulation of the golem's many parts. However, a mech, in our case, is piloted by heroes, and these heroes don't have the relevant skills and classes. Sure, they could still be manipulated and moved about relatively well, but not at the operating level expected of heroes. Certainly, not a level of performance where these mechs can see battle against the demon kings, even if it should still be quite sufficient for lower levels of demons. Most conventional weapons continue to work, as long as they were within the boundaries of Treehome's reality bubble. Now that we were able to move in space, we attempted to reach the very edges of this reality bubble, and realize it was more like a rubber ball, than actually a soap bubble. As we move closer to that edge, we are pushed closer towards the center of that reality bubble. So, it'll feel as if we are moving forward, but in reality we were not going anywhere. In other words, it was like there was a treadmill at edges of reality that pushed inwards. With enough force, and a high enough speed, it should be possible to overcome this force, and pierce the reality bubble directly. Still, day by day, I could sense the bubble of reality continued to expand. My domain ability was gradually pushing the world wider, and soon, it would be large enough to accommodate a secondary world. I wonder what it'll be like. Does the world just pop out of thin air? Or like a world drifting out of the void? Would it come with an inbuilt population, or would it be empty? 3 worlds. With the Crystal King imprisoned, the first moments of war began to emerge. The human kingdoms and nations struggled to realign in what was a tectonic shift in power. We sent diplomats everywhere, accompanied by our Valthorns. We had to show force, even if I didn't want to use the stick all the time. But I had to. There was a point of no return. When the Crystal King attempted to sabotage our preparations, that was the point of no return for me. They put my people at risk. Now, I put them at risk again, by making them force these human nations to bend their knee. Bloody or not, as with any large group of people, some were loyalists, and despite my declaration, they were not convinced. They fought. And what began was an unfortunately brutal occupation by my forces. Old leaders had to be expelled, especially those that sought to fight against me. Those that didn't, were actively and openly monitored. It was the noble class that opposed me most, and it was them that I had to remove. I tried a mix of carrot and stick. I enticed those willing to bend the knee with food supplies, resource assistance, and protection. Those that didn't were punished. I assisted family struggles, using those willing to work with me to overthrow those that didn't. The human nations, some attempted to attack us with their military. Johann became my enforcer. He traveled the land with his dragon, and struck fear into the kings and queens. Yet, they were attacked frequently, and in response, they were punished. Jailed, and at times slaughtered. It made me churn. A little. But then I remembered that there are times that we have to make an example of a few, to scare the masses. I had imprisoned the Crystal King. What was done, was done. Now, I deal with the consequences. It was a scene that was repeated across the kingdoms of the Crystal King's land. You come into my kingdom, and demand I bend the knee. The king roared, surrounded by his soldiers and knights. Golems. Johann was flanked by 6 elite Valthorns, all level 100s, and his golden dragon. The dragon grew day by day, feasting on the meat of the land. He laughed, and flexed his domain easily. The soldiers buckled. The king trembled in his seat, even though he stood. He held his scepter tightly, using it to support himself. It would not do for a king to cower in his throne. Johann smirked. No, I demand you work with us under the old arrangements with the Crystal King. You either accept, or you will be removed, and replaced with those who will. I'd rather not invite the brutality of Eon's mercy onto your land, or let you experience a little of Eon's perspective. The king held his scepter, and called on the strength of his class to withstand the weight of Johann's domain. One minister tried to speak up. Your Majesty, please, we should discuss this further. The king stared at the minister, but another minister spoke up for him. Your Majesty, the minister is wise. We were dealing with a god. We had sent our spies and agents into the many kingdoms, to bribe, to talk, to convince those who could be convinced. This occurred before Johann's visit, to prepare the field for the agreement. The same king agreed later on, convinced by his council of ministers. We bribed half of them, and attempted to bribe the other half. But they were wise enough to remain silent. They have seen our beetle armies. Many had used magic to look at what happened to Myelga, and were made speechless. But ultimately, we used the stick. There was an unfortunate king that opposed us to the end. He evoked war, and Johann made him into an example. We announced our intention to remove him as king, using charges collected by my spies. Then we killed him there and then, publicly before his own citizens and subjects. Death was a scythe we threatened on every noble. About 2/3 of the kingdoms eventually capitulated to our rule, even if we had to reward them with wealth. Wealth was no big deal. After all, it is a resource I can always create. 1/3 of them saw the writing on the wall, and realized I was stronger than their Crystal King. They agreed out of fear. The other third agreed with bribes. As for the remaining 1/3, we had to engage in power struggles. My agents helped those in favor of our new regime to overthrow their existing rulers, and functionally, install our people as the puppeteers of their new ruling state. Naturally, there was blood spilled. Kidnappings, murders and assassinations. all to prevent a bloodier war. The next one was to deal with the priests, and similar to the kings, we bribed them. Those that we couldn't bribe, we removed. My spies and assassins were busier than ever. Accidents. Visits to another world. I offered exile to those who wished to resist. I granted them the chance to live in Lava World. The priests of the Crystal King's land were granted the right to operate as normal, so long as they did not incite riots or attacks against us. The commoners and citizens of the Crystal King's lands, most of them couldn't be arsed, and in the era where high-speed communication is only available to the rich, most farmers and peasants didn't even know there was a change in power. They would learn of such changes over a longer period of time, through the stories spoken by merchants and bards. Again, bribes. It was honestly because I had the wealth of Treehome, that I could engage in such outright bribery of the masses. My spies fed these folks coin, and made them tell more pleasant versions of the story. We asked them to speak out how the Crystal King attempted to sabotage the hero Kefris battle against the Demon King. We were the Crystal King's divine punishment. It was an angle that worked well, and helped pacify the commoners. Many didn't really feel strong loyalties to the Crystal King. He was too distant, too aloof. His empire was more of a ragtag coalition of vassal states, rather than a proper federal structure. The improved farming yields from my druids and trees that came after soon placated the commoners who usually dealt with hunger and heavy taxation. Naturally, among the commoners, not all accepted the change of regime. This was most unfortunate. We tried to re-educate them, expose them to what happened. But ultimately, some were violent. And death is the only way to deal with them. It is unfortunate that regime change must occur this way. But I accept the blood on my hands. I will pay the price for my brutality, when my day comes. With blood on my roots and leaves, I will transform the world and the human lands into an economy that can support this war against the demons. Dwarf World. My mages and crafters analyzed the sunsteel and we believe it should be one of the components of what the demons use for the sun rings. At least, we believe the sun rings to be some kind of metallic alloy. It's this sunsteel mixed with something else altogether. So, Lumoof went with the first proposal. Trade. The Dwarven Lord rejected the offer, but Lumoof wasn't bothered. There were many Dwarven cities, and we would be able to find a smaller Dwarven city that we could support. Trade. The Dwarven Lord looked absolutely shocked. You want half of the sunsteel? You might as well rob us. Lumoof frowned. Half is fair. I will be doing the work. I really rather work this out on friendly terms rather than invade. I don't know who you are threatening. The Dwarven Lord didn't understand. Naturally, in front of him was just a man. A powerful man, but he didn't grasp exactly what he was faced with. Lumoof waited for a bit, and realized he might have a point. Though the Dwarven Lord rejected Lumoof's trade deal, Lumoof decided to explore the world some more, and realized this world, despite the constant brutal wars between the Dwarven cities, was also filled with many relatively high-level Dwarven craftsmen. Many were level 50 to 60, and they were available in very large quantities. There were multiple Dwarven craft academies throughout the world that produced the smiths, crafters and engineers needed to construct their gigantic war machines. And they loved large-scale construction projects. He pinged Stella. Stella, do you think you're keen on sending some dwarves from into our homeworld? Sure, but why? I am thinking of some good OL perspective. I think Alka would love this world. He could turn this world into one of those forge worlds. Stella paused. If they are a bunch of war-hungry dwarves, why not give them war? Lumoof paused as he digested Stella's message. You know what, you're right. We should give them war. Oh, do you want an invasion force? We're a little tight with half of our folks dealing with the comet remnants and the other half occupying Threeworld. No, I think I have something else in mind. Really? Will this world be worth it? Stella challenged. What do you have in mind? Get me a group of Dwarven lords from the academy willing to rule over some alien dwarves. Lumoof said. I believe this world has potential to assist our war efforts. A node should be sufficient, since we should be able to claim some land as our city. Got it. Stella laughed. The dwarf world was filled with many small dwarven towns and cities. Not all were competent, and not all have war machines. There were smaller towns, led by less powerful lords that we could depose. High-leveled, well-trained lords trained by the FTC could sweep in with Valthorn support, take over these smaller towns, and effectively cobble the smaller towns together into a coalition. Then, we could effectively convert the cities into our dwarven workshops. Rather than fight each other, it was time to channel the dwarven crafts towards a more productive war. We would turn this world into a forge world, and those war machines will find themselves battlefields where they can do some good.